Atheism and debates about atheism were one of the most important intellectual cross currents of the 18th century. If you were teaching a high school course or university course on the intellectual history of the 18th century, you'd talk a lot about atheism. It was one of the most important topics, one of the most important flashpoints for political and philosophical debate in the 19th century. Then in the 20th century, things get violent and things get surreal. It's very different than when we talk about atheism in the 20th century as opposed to the 19th century and the 18th century, right? If you're talking about the 18th century, you're talking about Voltaire. When you're talking about the 20th century, you're talking about Lenin. You're talking about atheism as advocated by the communists who violently took over Russia, created the Soviet Union in a civil war, et cetera, et cetera. And you get to talking about Mao Zedong. And, in case you didn't know, the relationship of each of these despotisms to atheism was much more fraught with contradiction and difficulty than you might at first like to imagine. It's not the case that simply communism, I think nobody in their right mind, looking back at the last several centuries, nobody could claim that communism advanced the cause of atheism. Of course, to a large extent, it discredited it. But, apart from such normative judgments, it's not the case that it even in a consistent way advocated for atheism throughout the century or so of communism being in vogue, being a powerful world-embracing ideology. Now, here we are in the 21st century. When I first started paying attention to YouTube, which was coincidentally when I had, I was going to say divorced my wife, but legally speaking, that's when I had separated from my wife. And then we started employing lawyers, and it took years to get divorced legally. But I just dumped my first wife and found myself suddenly with more time on my hands, and found myself thinking about what kind of videos I wanted to make on YouTube and how my own daughter might grow up one day to get to know the kind of man I was by seeing my face and seeing my voice on YouTube. At that moment, there was a lot of talk about atheism on this very platform and throughout the whole of the internet. Now, it's important to note that at that time, YouTube was not the leading medium. Social media generally, things like Twitter and so on, and Tumblr that did exist at that time. These were not leading the discussion. They were actually catching up with something that had been in vogue many years earlier. They were catching up with the old-fashioned printing press and television and radio. If you look at the timeline of when the so-called Four Horsemen of Atheism came into vogue, of when those books were bestsellers, of when these things were discussed on radio and TV and broadcast news, actually old-fashioned media, broadcast media, books, and so on, those were out there first. And then YouTube was catching up afterwards. But here was this new, boisterous, participatory, interactive medium taking the debate about atheism places it had never gone before, taking it into people's homes and workplaces and into podcasts, and getting in the same room, sometimes literally, sometimes via internet telephony, getting traditional Christian preachers together with advocates of atheism and having them meet each other and speak to each other and hear each other's positions. This was something new. I mean, I do not think ever on CNN, maybe CNN's a bad example, even say public access television. I can remember the old religious programs, wherever you are. Sorry, if you live in America or Canada. I actually don't know if Europe is like this. There used to be this really low budget broadcast, call it cable access television, public access television. And oh God, every 2-bit cult and religious group had a program. And once in a while, in some areas, there'd be a call-in show for atheists to compete with all that noise. But I would say probably nowhere in the world was the opportunity before that we had here on YouTube to bring those people together, contrast their views, and for us all to learn from the wisdom and the folly of the ensuing debates. So even though YouTube and social media actually lagged behind print media, lagged behind even what was in the newspapers of the time, It then brought this new vitality to the discourse about atheism. And someone in my position at that time just split up with my first wife, and I've just split up with my religion. I mean, I just turned the corner. It was like, okay, me and Buddhism are done. Again, if you guys are interested, I can talk more about the timeline of my interaction with Buddhism. And it was reasonable for me to expect, wow, so here we are at the start of a new century, the 21st century, and atheism is once again going to become a major epoch-defining area of political discourse. This is going to become another century-defining debate, atheism and the future of religion in our times. And I was wrong. The reality is that YouTube has become a century-defining subject of debate. Social media, the format itself would go on to change the century. This, what we're doing right now, I'm live streaming. Anyone in my audience, hi Frida. Anyone who wants to talk to me, about this would change the century. This would become a popular, permanent aspect of our culture. But the interest in atheism would prove to be unbelievably shallow and fleeting. Now, I'm always suspicious of this word necessity and necessary, these concepts in English. I think it's very easy for anyone to take a step back and look at their own culture, and it may be even easier to look at a foreign culture and say, okay, well, this is a necessary change. That things must change. There's a necessary change to come here. Now, you guys may not know Tibetan Buddhism the way I know Tibetan Buddhism. Traditionally, Tibetan Buddhism included sex rituals, what people now call tantric sex rituals, but regardless. Tibetan Buddhism included human sacrifice. Tibetan Buddhism included taking the skull from a human sacrifice, cutting it, fashioning it into a bowl that you could eat from, a magical bowl made out of a human skull. Anyone can take a step back and look at that and say, this is the 21st century. This has got to change. Things can't stay the same. It's necessary. What are you going to do to change it? Now, in case you don't know, this is a highly hypothetical discussion, because what actually happened to Tibet was that they were conquered by the Communist Army of China. They were incorporated into Communist China, and their whole tradition was obliterated and then kind of reconstructed thereafter. Currently, there's a bit of a phony revival of Buddhism in Tibet, but as you can imagine, some things get revived and not others. So the performance of the Epic of Geshar is being revived. That's a traditional pseudo-historical narrative of a historical figure, sort of like King Arthur, the equivalent of King Arthur in Tibet. The Communist Party has allowed that to be revived, but I think you can imagine a variety of things, from tantric sex rituals to human sacrifice. Nobody is going to tolerate that being revived in the 21st century. Okay, so that's easy. It's easy to see this as necessary, right? What's not easy is looking at your own life and looking at the 20 years you have in front of you, the next 20 years in the future, saying, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make it happen? Really thinking through, for whom is it necessary? What does it even mean to say that this is necessary? It's a necessary change that has to come. When you walk through the streets of Montreal, Quebec, when you walk through the streets of Paris, France, you are surrounded by church architecture on all sides. Predominantly Catholic, but if you look carefully, there are other forms of Christianity competing with the Catholic Church. You are enclosed by the accumulated brickwork of so many centuries of religious history. When you watch Star Trek, is that what life looks like? When you watch Star Wars, is that what life looks like? I don't know that many current gen science fiction shows. When you watch Firefly, when you watch Babylon 5, I don't know, you guys can fill in the blanks from here. Whenever you watch depictions of the future, including even some really grim depictions of the post-apocalyptic future, is life dominated by the Christian church, by the Catholic Church? Is life dominated by Islam in this way? Is that the future we assume for ourselves? Now, it may be a little bit more subtle than talking about human sacrifice, but it's not that subtle. It's amazing to me that people don't even really think about this. Do you believe that in the future, people should live in celibacy until marriage? I think we have a really complex cultural debate to engage in about, age of consent and when people should start having sex. And that's something I think even most parents just avoid thinking about. Are we moving towards a culture where people start having sex at age 14? Or are we moving towards a culture where everyone's expected to remain celibate until age 18? In some jurisdictions, that's the case, where it's criminal for anyone to have sex with anyone below age 18. What is the solution? But in any case, does the future involve circumcision? Does the future involve arranged marriage? Does the future involve celibacy until marriage? Does the future involve the church controlling your fate in this way? When I was on the campus of Cambridge University, England, what freaked me out wasn't the church architecture, and it wasn't the singing of church hymns. It was the fact that I was surrounded by people who were left-wing secular intellectuals, left-wing atheists, and even communists. There were a lot of communists at Cambridge University. And they had no problem with this. And they were attending the church services. I didn't know any who were literally singing in the choir, but they were going to hear these songs being sung and attend these services in these centuries-old cathedrals in Cambridge. Okay, well, gee, it seemed really simple before when you were talking about the demolition of a foreign exotic culture's religious tradition, right? We were talking about persecuting Buddhist monks and saying, no, you can't do these things anymore that have been part of your sacred tradition for centuries. Oh, no, you have to change. You have to be forced. You have to be compelled to change. And then as soon as you shifted back to a culture that's more familiar to you, as soon as you're talking about, the cathedrals of Cambridge, England, as soon as you're talking about the church architecture in Paris, as soon as you're talking about the reality of walking down the street in Montreal, suddenly you become uncomfortable. What is going to change? If our presumption is that change is necessary, what does that necessity really mean? One of the chief differences between the 17th century, I guess I should say 18th century. We could talk about 17th century atheism too. Let's talk about the 18th century and people like the Baron de Holbach. Improve my French if you can. De Holbach, something like this. The Baron de Holbach in English. Talking about 18th century atheism, right? These were people witnessing the transformation of society by scientific breakthroughs and by what we would now call industrialization, with rapidly improving quality of life, rapidly improving standards of living for everyone. The emergence of flowing water through a pipe, whether that's a tap to wash your hands, eventually, the invention of the toilet, there are all these kind of miracles that we now take utterly for granted. The first breakthroughs in understanding electricity, which would eventually be harnessed to provide us with lights and radios and all these other, again, things we take utterly for granted, all these other conveniences of modern life. Just at the start of that, and seeing the transformation of life that was accomplished by things like the mechanization of the production of fabric. Going from a world, imagine yourself living in a world where every pair of socks worn by every man, woman, and child, rich or poor, was knitted by hand. Everyone is wearing hand-knitted socks, to a world where there are factory-produced socks. It's a big change. It's a big difference, okay? The transformation of life. And you see the peasants who used to be tending goats and sheep now working inside that factory and producing, those materials and wearing them themselves. And you see, wow, now with factory production, the average urban poor person, running out of vocabulary here, the average worker, shall we say, the average employed person in the city can now afford clothing better than kings and queens could afford just a century ago. The quality of life is improving so rapidly. There was a reckless confidence in the 18th century that improving standard of living, improving technology, and simply the carrot and stick of science education would wipe out the superstitions of the Dark Ages, would wipe out religion, that religion would either cease to exist or it would be transformed. It would be rationalized. It would become an unrecognizable modern version of itself. Now, in our own times, I remember reading the autobiography of, I'm sorry, this wasn't quite an autobiography. I'll clarify in a second. But it was a book like an autobiography of a diplomat sent from, I think it was from England to Saudi Arabia. So it was really a book about the political history of Saudi Arabia, but it was written by someone who had lived there and worked there and seen the transformation of the country. So I'm sorry, autobiography is not quite the right term. But I remember this guy saying, so if you guys don't know, there were a lot of British out there. Saudi Arabia wasn't always called Saudi Arabia, and Iraq wasn't always called Iraq, and so on. But the British Empire and the French Empire were out there mucking around in Arabia, broadly defined, the Arab and Iranian part of the world, Arab and Persian semi-continent or whatever. And, reading someone like that who lived that period of time describing, there was a time when water was precious here. There was a time when someone would load up their mule and make a 2-day journey to get water and carry it back. And now they have the oil industry. And the oil industry has financed the government building plumbing, building pipes that have made water worthless and free. And so you turn on the tap and instantly you have an unlimited, unmeasured supply of water. Water, once scarce, has become ubiquitous. This, really unimaginable transformation of society. And, it's easy to be cynical about this, but especially if you take a centuries-long view of it, if you're looking over, say, a 200-year period, even though Saudi Arabia is a country with a very deep division between rich and poor, in this sense, the material conditions of the poorest people, they've been transformed more than the wealthiest people. I mean, poor people in Saudi Arabia have shoes made in factories now. They have water from a tap. They have electricity, like things you take for granted in a Western first world country. Well, those technologies, they arrived in Saudi Arabia late and they arrived suddenly. Saudi Arabia did not have electricity when Benjamin Franklin was performing his experiments with electricity in Philadelphia. They did not participate in the very first, mass deployment of plumbing when that was going on in places like Edinburgh and London. The early adopters, the innovators of what's now, modern sanitation, modern plumbing technology. This stuff arrived there later, and they discovered and harnessed the wealth of oil under the ground quite late. It is commonly said that if the British had known how much oil was in Saudi Arabia, that the British Empire would have never ended. The British would not have given it up. It's a purely hypothetical statement. And it may be anachronistic in various ways. And you guys may not know this, but before the oil reserves in Saudi Arabia and Iraq were known, many people, and certainly people in the British Empire and the French Empire, they assumed that Myanmar was going to be economically a much more important country than it was, because Myanmar had known oil reserves. Where oil was known to be is very different from where it actually is. Today, the amount of oil in Myanmar is not considered very significant, but we've gone on to discover and exploit oil in all these other places all around the world. So for a brief time, it was presumed that Saudi Arabia would be locked in poverty forever as this desert wasteland. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to change. Religion didn't change. The optimism of the 18th century has proven to be totally, utterly false, right? Saudi Arabia didn't change. It didn't adapt. The church didn't have. Now, I have a great question on this. Okay, how about Switzerland? No. Switzerland is a relatively positive example of a democracy in so many ways. If you compare Switzerland to Saudi Arabia, hands up. Who would rather spend the rest of their lives in Switzerland and who would rather spend the rest of their lives in Saudi Arabia? There's no beach. Let me tell you something. If you're in Switzerland, once in a while, you might think you'd rather be in Yemen because of the beach. I hear good things about the beach in Yemen, snorkeling. I met a guy who worked for the tourism department of Yemen, believe it or not. He told me a lot about how wonderful Yemen was in some ways. I also hear bad things about Yemen. Anyway, I've known a few different Yemenis in my life, just people I cross paths with and talk to. A remarkable country in so many ways. Yeah, Switzerland is a positive example of a Western democracy, the quality of education, the level of direct democracy, participatory democracy, the institutions of how laws are actually voted on and debated. We can say some positive things about Switzerland. Okay, how much has religion progressed in Switzerland? So whether you can look at Switzerland as one of the optimal examples of modernization of technology. Obviously, Switzerland's a country where everyone has access to drinking water, electricity, and the internet. And you can look at Saudi Arabia at the opposite extreme. But what do they have in common? They both remain intensely religious nations. Both of them, in so many ways, have failed to emerge from the darkness of the Dark Ages. And the technology of how government itself is organized, the development of modern bureaucracy, right? This has also, you could say, it's either failed to challenge religion or it has made religion more powerful. That we now live in a world where increasingly the organization of church resembles the organization of state. In France, in Switzerland, in Germany, you basically have modern tax collection supporting churches. I remember talking to a woman with a PhD about how she was paying her contributions to the church in Germany and so on. And this it now resembles a modern collection of taxes. And indeed, sir, I know there are ongoing controversies in England about the extent to which the Anglican Church should now have a fully modern, parliamentary style bureaucracy, given that they do not have separation of church and state, given that for them, the church is explicitly a branch of the government. And for example, the government is put upon to pay for the pensions, to pay for the retirement benefits and medical benefits of all the employees of the Anglican Church. So the bureaucratization of religion, which I assume has also been ongoing in Saudi Arabia. To be honest, I have not read anything about that side of it. But the modernization of religion may only be making it worse and not better. Okay. Yeah. So there's also a mention here that Switzerland only had equal rights for women in 1990. As I recall, that happened principality by principality in Switzerland. So that's why it's so late. So the last few districts that didn't have the equal right to vote for women caught up in 1990. But it's not that the whole country didn't have women's right to vote in 1990. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, that's why, in that sense, Switzerland lagged behind. They didn't have full rights for women everywhere in the country because they believed in this principle of local democracy, of letting local debates and votes happen in each tiny principality constituting the whole. Okay. So look, you have all seen the title of this video. Now you tell me, guys, this is your opportunity to be part of the content of this video. What is the future of atheism? Are we just supposed to shrug our shoulders and carry on with the assumption that, oh yeah, there was this brief period where atheism was on the news and had best-selling books written by complete idiots like Sam Harris. And now, if you don't think Sam Harris is an idiot, we have 24 people in the audience right now. You can just tell me, you can just look in the mirror. You can tell me, do you personally feel that you are stupider than Sam Harris? I doubt it. I think everybody here, I think everybody who watches this video, I think all of you, when you look in the mirror late at night, when you evaluate your own intelligence, I think you actually do count yourself as more intelligent than Sam Harris. So at a minimum, the guy is a mediocre or sub-mediocre intellect. But if not, if you don't share my view that he's actually a complete imbecile. Okay. People like Sam Harris had smash hit, best-selling books about atheism, right? And they appeared on the radio and they appeared on TV, and those debates and that energy spilled out here onto YouTube. Okay. And a lot of money flowed into atheism too. There were a lot of donations, right? And a lot of that money went to people like Jacqueline Glenn. It's the truth, right? A lot of that support went to supporting people who really shouldn't have been supported and didn't do anything positive with it. You can take a look at what Jacqueline Glenn does today on YouTube, what she's done over the last 10 years in aggregate, But I mean, my fundamental question is to ask, what next? What now? So there was that brief moment that came and went. All this money flowed in, all this attention, all this interest flowed in. But two big failures. One, there was a failure to create institutions. Now, this is my opinion. Some of you may disagree with me. Some of you might say, oh no, the Church of Satan in California is accomplishing really great things. I know there were some institutions created by that period of interest in atheism. If you guys don't know, there's this, I forget, the technical name might be the Satanic Temple. I'm sorry, I might be getting the name slightly wrong. But there's this group of so-called Satanists in California who go around starting amusing legal objections to reinforce separation of church and state. So to give an example, there was a courthouse in America that had a display of the Ten Commandments in front of the courthouse. This is on government property. Now, many countries in the world, England, France, Germany, many countries don't enforce separation of church and state at all. So if there's a religious monument like this on a courthouse's steps or on government property, where you have no legal leverage. But the excuse made for this Judeo-Christian display was that it would be acceptable because they would be open to all religions applying and having their own statue, having their own monument. So the activists from the Church of Satan, and their real objective is to promote atheism, they sent in this hilarious artist's concept of, Baphomet, of this form of Satan with goat horns, directly influencing children sitting on a throne. It was Baphomet and the throne being kind of worshipped by two children. And they're like, oh, well, this is our traditional satanic statue that, we want to have parallel to, we want to have it next to the statue to Moses and the Ten Commandments. And this shows, they wrote this, in a subtle way, hilarious satirical statement. Oh, this shows the close relationship between Satan and children in the next generation and blah, blah, blah. And, as you can imagine, the local city council or whoever it was, if it was the city government or the state government, they suddenly decided to change their tune and just get rid of the monument to the Ten Commandments rather than stand by their word of opening the door to applicants from all religions equally to have their own display. Okay, so there are some little examples like this. But I think it is fair to say in the United States of America, and I think in all of Europe, I think in the whole Western world, I do not believe anywhere on earth, by the way, certainly not in Israel. Talk about a country where you need a really strong atheist political movement. Show me the atheist movement in Israel. I do not think that anywhere in the Western world there is even one atheist organization as powerful and substantive as People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. So like what PETA is to animal rights, I do not think there is an atheist organization at that level. And in case you don't know, I hate PETA and I regard PETA as a failure. I'm a very harsh critic of PETA. But like if you give PETA a 5 out of 10 in terms of success, my point is there are no atheist organizations that even reach that level of being a 5 out of 10. Now, I could now give more positive examples of organizations that are closer to an 8 or a 9 out of 10 or something, more successful or civil society organizations. But that's not my point. My point is when we're looking at atheism, past, present, future, we're looking at institutional failure on such a level that we're nowhere near a 5 out of 10. The other failure, though, is more impalpable. It's more immaterial, but it is just as important. It is a fog passing through the 21st century. And that is the lack of will, the lack of spirit. I look at my fellow atheists, and we all know It's easier to have spirit. It's easier to have will. It's easier to have self-confidence when you're just sitting in front of a camera and you're not, say, at the Wailing Wall in Israel. You're not actually on the ground talking to a rabbi. You're not on the ground talking to a, traditional Christian church pastor. You're not dealing with Muslim fundamentalists face to face. You're not maybe afraid for your life, right? Oh, it's easier to talk tough. It's easier to have spirit. It's easier to have a fierce will when you're on camera. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't even see it on camera. I was going to say the movement has lost its will, but as is stated in the title here, I feel that there is no movement. But even if you look at the kind of fragments that could be a movement, what I see instead is a lot of self-hatred, self-deception. Yes, also self-indulgence. Yes, fame whoring. Yes, people just, pursuing their own monetary success, so however you want to put it. But, I have made videos saying seriously and sincerely, I want to see churches pulled down. I'm not a status quo philosopher here. I'm not a status quo player in politics. Look at the school system in Quebec. Look at the school system in France. Look at the school system in Saudi Arabia. Look at whatever example you want to use. Do you believe that the future is Muslims putting their children into madrasas, into Muslim religious schools, so they have a Muslim upbringing, so that the science textbook that teaches them about evolution is written by a Muslim cleric for true believing Muslims? That's their science education. It's going to a madrasa, it's going to a Muslim school. Look, again, it doesn't exist in the world, but we could say this about Tibetan Buddhism. Like, hypothetically, would you want Tibetan children being raised by Tibetan monks in a traditional Tibetan education? Like, we can talk about this hypothetically to some extent. There are some Buddhist countries where at least orphans do kind of get a Buddhist, they're raised by a Buddhist temple. You can talk about that. Very, very small number of children now, their only education is going to a Buddhist temple. I was interested in this. This is a research interest for me. I knew about cases in Myanmar where there were orphans, and it was, the good news was they weren't starving. There were orphans who were taken care of by Buddhist monks. That was a situation of absolute poverty. So, they were getting food and shelter, but no education. But that's in a country where a lot of people get no education at all. So I just say this is not really I'm just mentioning you can at least talk about a hypothetical example with Buddhism this way. My point being, it's not just the Judeo-Christian religions. But if the Judeo-Christian religions are a large percentage of the world's population, a large percentage of the Earth's surface, okay, so we've all agreed that some kind of change is necessary. What does necessary mean? Does necessary mean it'd be nice if someone else did it and you don't have to do it? It'd be nice if someone else took responsibility, but you don't want to take responsibility? What does necessary mean? Okay, it's really a bad idea that in Canada, Muslim children, the children of Muslim parents, should be sent to be educated in Muslim-only schools. Well, it's happening right now. How about the Christians? How about the Hutterites? So if you don't know who the Hutterites are, they're an especially despicable Christian group. Do you think that Hutterites should go to school only with other Hutterites? Do you think that Catholics should go to school only with other Catholics? Do you think that sex education and evolution should be taught in the Catholic schools? Whatever example you want to use, right? And when you watch Star Trek or you watch Star Wars, is that what the future is like? Guys, I'm a bit of a pessimist for technological change. I think that most of what we use in terms of consumer technology, invisibly, is limited by the laws of physics. I'll give you guys a real brief example. It's very easy to fantasize that in the future, the battery inside your cell phone will have 10 times as much or 100 times as much energy as the battery does today. Okay, well, if you don't know this, it's not that it's outright impossible to increase the amount of energy, but once you increase the amount of energy, and obviously you have to change the materials, then you're getting into something that is tremendously hot to the touch. See, there are other constraints. You're getting into something that's a liquid rather than a solid. And there are some special batteries that are like a vat of, looks like lava, but it's a vat of liquid metal that's carrying all these electrons. You get into constraints about what's possible. So the laws of physics in that sense limit how much technological progress or change is possible. And the other thing is the limits of our biology, okay? at a reasonable size, like the size of the computer screen I'm looking at now, you cannot see the difference between 2K video and 4K video. So we can keep improving the density of the image on a computer screen or a movie screen. You can, but you can't behold it. We're past the point of diminishing returns in terms of the difference technology can make. Now, by the way, just brief digression. It's true if the image is enormous enough, if you're having a screen the size of a wall, you have a huge screen in your living room, then you can see the difference between 2K and 4K. Whether or not it's worth thousands of dollars is another question. I don't feel it is, but whatever. I have monastic tastes, in case you haven't noticed. There are these two great constraints about the difference, technology can make in our lives. Now, really briefly, there is another sense in which technology is not constrained, right? And that's the technology of war. Killing people is going to get easier and easier. It's going to get faster and faster. Already, if you guys don't know this, it's terrifying when you look into it. There are laser-based weapons that anyone can acquire, like terrorists can acquire as well as governments, and smugglers, I know, have made use of this. There are laser-based weapons that instantly fire a pulse of laser that's invisible. You don't see it in the light, and it permanently destroys your vision. So it also causes intense pain and normally gets something like bleeding from the eyes. But in one moment, you have a pulse of light, which I believe it's outside of the optical spectrum, and it destroys the vision of anyone who's looking in that direction and has their eyes open instantly. So you can wipe out, like in a battlefield situation, you can wipe out soldiers. In an urban situation, you can wipe out people in the city. And I read in detail about a case where there were smugglers or whatever, an illegal shipment on a boat of some kind. And they were being approached by a helicopter from something like a Coast Guard, some kind of police authority of this kind. And in order to escape, they fired one of these lasers that almost killed the pilot and co-pilot. Because if you're blinded, again, this is permanent, this lifelong injury. But in that moment, your ability to land the helicopter, if you've been blind, or continue flying without dying is terrible. Now, this development can continue. The further perfection of nuclear arms, the further perfection of drones, automated aircraft. Now, one of the reasons for that, why I'm saying that can really continue to progress, is exactly that it's not constrained by biology in the way that the 4K screen is. The quality of the screen you can make for a computer or for a cinema, it's constrained by our ability to appreciate it, our ability to behold it, right? When you're talking about the technology used to kill people, there's no such constraint, because obviously this is something that goes far beyond our biological limits, right? You're exactly talking about overwhelming the human body in different ways. So our ability, so likewise, by the way, so this is an imperfect comparison, but it's an instructive one. How much can aspirin be improved technologically? So aspirin has been around for about 100 years. Alexa, in what year was aspirin discovered?
Here's something I found on the internet. In 1897, Felix Hoffmann invented acetylsalicylic acid.
Alexa, stop. 100 years. More than 100 years. So, this is similar to what I was saying about the battery in your phone. Like it's not that you couldn't have more energy in a compact place, but once you're exceeding the limits of the laws of physics as we have them here, you're getting into other trade-offs, other disadvantages. Like, okay, if you want more energy in the same amount of space in your phone, then differences in temperature, differences in the consistency, solid versus liquid, you're starting to get into, and by the way, differences in reliability. How often are you willing to put up with them exploding or catching flame? Currently it's 1 in a million, but what if it's 10 in a million? What if it's just, what if they blow up just a little bit more often, because cell phone batteries do blow up once in a while, in case you haven't heard. They are an imperfect technology as it stands. Okay. All right. You want a pill that can relieve your headache. Why are we still using a technology that's over 100 years old? There are trade-offs. Okay, we have invented pills that will relieve your headache more rapidly. And they're addictive. And they have side effects. Okay? There are a whole lot of chemicals we've developed that will have a pleasing effect on you and will alleviate your headache. And we don't really want them being sold over the counter the way we sell aspirin. right? There are trade-offs. Like you can have a more powerful battery, but are you sure you want that when you know the disadvantages? You can have a more powerful pill to relieve your neck pain or your headache or whatever it is, these kinds of things. Are you sure you want? So we're stuck with 100-year-old technology for headaches and fever in the pill that's aspirin. Okay, but when you're taking away that biological constraint, when you're talking about making a gas that can kill people, we're talking about biological and chemical weapons, there's no limit, right? That stuff can all get much deadlier. And in case you didn't know, we have just been living through what is ostensibly the first global pandemic caused by a laboratory accident. The first that we know of. Is it possible that other global pandemics, epidemics, and diseases were in fact developed in laboratories and released accidentally or intentionally? I have read accounts in the Soviet Union where in Russia, they were making biological and chemical weapons that were accidentally released from the lab, but their impacts were just localized. There were like a couple villages in Russia and the Soviet Union where basically everyone died. And it's horrifying. And, Soviet Union, they had control of all the newspapers, so they were able to present it to the public in a certain kind of way. But it's not totally unprecedented in that sense, right? Okay, so so there are some forms of technological progress, that are going to continue to increase exponentially. Alexa, in what year was the toilet invented?
Here's something I found on the web. According to Mzio.com, the first flushing toilet was invented in 1596 by Sir John Harrington.
1596? Okay, well, all right, that's okay. That's not Thomas Crapper's toilet. Okay, well, somebody made an early model back in the 16th century. But anyway, look, we're definitely at more than 100 years. Okay, let's look it up. Year Thomas Crapper invented the toilet. Yeah, I'm getting a laugh out of Melissa. Thomas Crapper. Thomas Crapper's water closet looks around 1880. This gets rolling.
My grandmother still used an outhouse in the 1920s.
Yep. Well, look, that's just what I was going to talk about right now. So look, my own engagement with ecology went through various phases. There's one way you can look at ecology and be optimistic about, well, we're going to invent something better than this toilet we've had for 150 years, let's say, roughly. Like moving forward with technologies. And then the other way you can look at it is going backward. So, Melissa was mentioning her mother had an outhouse. I used to live in Cambodia. Did you know this about me? It's probably the first time I've ever mentioned it. I've probably never mentioned. I used to live in Cambodia. I used to live in Laos. I have some experience with other kinds of toilets. And before I ever went out to Cambodia and Laos, there were some ecologists who were really optimistic about the so-called the sawdust toilet, about returning to a non-flushing compost-based toilet. These kinds of things existed, right? Okay, well, I've got to tell you something. I'm a complete pessimist in this respect, all right? I think technology is going to continue to give us more addictive video games. It's going to continue to give us more addictive street drugs. Do you think fentanyl is going to be the final invention this way? Do you think there's not something coming next after fentanyl? No? Do you think OxyContin and oxycodone are the end of the development of addictive painkillers? Right after, okay, so what? Originally there was heroin, then there was what's the? God, it's slipping my name. Sorry, we had a series of opiates. You had heroin, you had OxyContin, oxycodone. Now you've got fentanyl. What's next? All right, you think it's going to get better? You think it's going to get worse? You think we're going to forget how to make addictive chemicals? Right? There's more addictive stuff is coming. We invented LSD. We invented what people call ecstasy, MDMA. We invented these. What's next? These things are going to keep progressing. Destructive drugs are going to keep progressing. I'm a real pessimist when you talk about things that are actually useful, things that are actually going to improve human life. I think we're very limited. By the way, guys, have you been reading the news lately? Have you heard this? There is no cure for the common cold. There is never going to be a cure for the common cold. There is never going to be a cure for herpes simplex, which I think is like the most widely transmitted disease on planet Earth. If not, it's in like the top 5. There's never going to be a cure for the common cold. In case you didn't know, the common cold One of the most common forms of it is called coronavirus. We've been coming up against the limits of our ability scientifically to create vaccines for coronaviruses, which include the common cold. Like, there are some limits we're up against here, right? But in terms of the destructive potential of technology, look, guys, we can use this in all kinds of different examples. Our technology, our ability to cut down trees is getting better and better. Our ability to grow trees, like, how much do you think that's going to improve? How much do you think our ability to create forests as opposed to our ability to destroy forests? And in the last 2 centuries, you see all that progress. Oh, we can get faster at cutting down trees. We can't get faster at growing them, right? There is more technological change to come. And some of it is so fucking obvious. I keep saying this in the videos about steroids. And I say it also in the videos talking about antidepressants. Like, look, I mean, the public addiction to drugs like Haldol that don't work, drugs like Prozac that don't work, that's one problem. But you know what else is creeping up on us is the addiction to performance-enhancing drugs, including even testosterone. Testosterone works. It's much more threatening, and it's a mind-altering drug as well as a body-altering drug. Okay, do you think that's the end of the do you think what's next? We invented Anavar, we invented SARMs, right? We invented this whole variety of performance-enhancing drugs and various ways of transfusing more testosterone into people. Okay, you think that's the end of that development? And you think if we don't prepare for this culturally, intellectually, philosophically, do you think we're going to be better prepared or worse prepared for the next wave of mind-altering, body-altering, habit-forming, performance-enhancing drugs? Because they do. They have a certain kind of high to them. Even testosterone itself does. By the way, it boosts you up, right? We were so well prepared for fentanyl, right? Like, our culture, having been through the experience with heroin addiction and oxycodone addiction, we were really prepared to deal with fentanyl addiction, right? Are you prepared for what comes next? Culturally, legally, like, as a democracy, are you ready? Are you ready for what comes next? Think about how we dealt with any of these things. Religion, our cure for drug addiction is people going to find Jesus. That's the only fucking cure we've got. And like in Thailand, it's people going to a Buddhist monastery, which I think works better. I mean, there's a question. Let's compare the efficacy of people converting to Christianity versus converting to Buddhism, devoting themselves, Buddhist devotion versus Christian devotion, vis-a-vis sobriety and drug addiction. But look, it's all bullshit. I mean, Buddhism is also built on, oh yeah, right. This book, I've wanted to read this book for years. If my ex-wife were watching this, she would remember, I wanted to buy this and I was too poor. I wanted to buy this years and years ago. Well, maybe she wouldn't remember. But when I was with my ex-wife, I finally bought a copy and I still don't have time to read it. Partly because I'm busy writing my own book. Trying to get the final manuscript out. But, we are still, as a society, limping along on this crutch, relying on Christian charity. And guess what it says in the Bible? It says, why was wine put on this earth, if not to make men happy? The Bible isn't pro-sobriety. It's not. You know what I mean? It's not. And a lot of devout Christians smoke marijuana and drink alcohol, and and so on and so forth. All right, I'm going to take a moment now to look at to read your comments. It looks like there are some intelligent comments here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all stupidity. Babe, if you want to jump in, sorry, my girlfriend Melissa is off camera. She also counts as a member of the audience. But I normally, if you wanted to, you could type your comments on. I mean, if you wanted to, instead of giving them verbally.
You said that everybody has seen the title, but I actually have not seen the title of your video.
All right, there you go. Let's look it up. The title of the video is "Atheism is Dead: the future of a movement that isn't moving." Yeah. Okay, so it does look like there's some intelligent comments here.
Yeah, I really appreciated what you said about something being necessary, but
Yeah.
does that mean that you don't have to do anything?
Right.
Like, if it's necessary, then it means you have to do
Right.
something personally. But once it gets to the point where people actually have to do something or refuse to do something,
Right.
they fold, they don't do it.
Well, you may not know, but that's part of the reason why Marxists are so lazy, is that Marxists believe that their future utopia is inevitable. It's the doctrine of historical inevitability.
Revolution is coming.
Yeah, no, but in their utopia, that's that's the future history that will no matter what. So why not just smoke marijuana? Why not just why not just feel morally superior to others and sit on your ass and live a comfortable life? Why get out on the vanguard and actually risk your neck or do something daring or positive? So yeah, it's actually interesting. That's a source of passivity, even for a kind of secular religion or godless religion like Marxism and communism. Now, nevertheless, there are some communists who have quite a work ethic, shall we say. For whatever reason, Noel Keene says, quote, "I would love you to do a talk or debate with Sam Harris. Would you agree to it if you were to agree?" So, Noel, I don't know if you are connected. I don't know if you are a big donor who can push Sam Harris around, but it is incredibly unlikely that Sam Harris would ever talk to me. It is incredibly unlikely that Sam Harris would acknowledge my existence. And I remember seeing some people on Reddit saying that they were quite sure that Sam Harris had seen my videos. And they knew this on the basis of, so I don't know if Sam Harris uses Discord or just his Twitter or something, but they said, look, normally a video like this that's reached just a few thousand views criticizing him, he does see those. Like they heard him mention enough, like obscure YouTube videos and again, that's possibly because his fans sent him the link. It's possibly because he Googles his own name. Like, however, I'm not faulting him for that. It is quite likely, and based on what his fans told me, it was just people who had really been following him. They were like, "Oh no, he'll be aware of this guy's critique of him by now. He will have heard this." Back when I made a series of videos criticizing him, so obviously no, that's not going to happen. All right. So Henry Gann says, "Quote: The God hole exists." He has God hole in quotation marks. What do you replace religion with? Okay, Henry, I think that is a profoundly misleading question. Okay. Male circumcision exists. What do you replace circumcision with? There is no replacement. There is no substitution. All right. Millions and millions of men will just not have 60% of the nerve endings in their penis cut off. Okay. Female circumcision exists. What are you going to replace it with? There is no replacement. There's nothing. Like, what do you think? You think people are walking around mourning the fact they didn't undergo female circumcision? Like, oh, there's just this emptiness in my life. There's something I'm lacking. There's a hole. I know this God-shaped hole concept because they didn't undergo circumcision. Okay, arranged marriage exists. Do you think people are going to be walking around feeling they lack something? They lack religion because they don't have arranged marriage. All right, and look, I don't know anyone who isn't busy. I just don't believe there are people who are going to be walking around saying they have nothing to do on Sunday if there was no more church service on Sunday. I just don't believe it. In none of these senses, it's not credible to me. So what I'm saying to you is, you may want to discuss this further. If you're still in the audience, you can say further. It's one thing to say you don't believe in God. It's another thing to say you don't believe in the God-shaped hole. I don't believe that the deletion of God leaves anything lacking in people. I don't believe it. Yeah. Now, again, if you actually go and see these people face to face, or you sit in the classroom, it might be different for you. If you actually go to a Mormon school, if you actually go to a Muslim madrasa, do you think these children will be impoverished or their lives will be worse if instead they're integrated into a government secular school? I don't believe it. That's right. Where I grew up in Toronto, there were Jewish Orthodox schools. There were Muslim-only schools. There were Catholic-only schools. I just do not believe there's a God-shaped hole in people's lives if they give that up and then are integrated into what do you think they've lost? Oh, they've lost out on homophobia. They've missed out on being told that evolution is just a theory. You know what I mean? Like all this horse shit they get laden down with in their youth by going to a religious school. They've lost out on guilt and all this, they've lost out on prayer, or being taught to pray before they write a test and shit like this, before they do a sports competition. I just don't buy it. So I'm sorry. Anyway, thanks for the donation. Someone just chipped in 10 pounds. Guys, we have 32 people in the audience. If you guys want to hit thumbs up, this is a Saturday, so most of my followers are out getting drunk or something. I do have a smaller audience on weekends than weekdays. But if you guys want to hit thumbs up, it'll help more people discover the video, both while we're live and after. Do you have something to say on that, Pip?
I was just going to say, I think the promise of eternal life is something
Yes.
people will miss.
Okay, so again, I have to put it on a human scale. I have to put it on a face-to-face scale. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't think, now, if you talk to someone who used to have that delusion, I mean, look, first I'll do something where there's a human face on it. Talk to someone who used to sit by their bed and pray, and they genuinely believed that there was a supernatural person who heard their prayer and who responded. And maybe they even heard the voice of God talking to them. And then they hit a point in their life where they don't believe in that anymore. The same way, you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. And where they look back on that with scorn and derision and really see it as something quite dangerous, hearing the voice of God or speaking to God. I don't believe there is a hole in people's lives when they stop talking to God, and when they stop listening to God or hearing the voice of God. I don't believe it. I don't believe there's any sense in which they're poorer or they feel there's something they need to replace with. I do not buy it. Now, look, sorry, I'll come back to your example in a second. But all right, I knew a lot of First Nations people, First Nations, American Indian, Cree, Ojibwe, Mohawk, these types of people, Dene, so these are the native tribes. Most of them had some history of ambivalent engagement with the traditional religion of their tribe, right? And some sense of sort of national pride in that religion, the non-Christian animist religion, okay? Even for them, and this is very different from talking about Christianity, because we're here not really talking about an oppressive religion in the same way, all right? I don't think any of them could say that they felt their lives were worse when they stopped being afraid of ghosts, when they stopped being afraid of curses, when they stopped being afraid of miscellaneous, magical, superstitious things that their grandmothers believed in stereotypically. Again, each one of these people has a different story. Some of them, their grandmother was a communist, whatever. And then each family is different. But if they were kind of typical family where the grandmother really had these traditions of believing in sacred and superstitious and invisible things, and then as the next generations go, there's less and less patience for that. Increasingly, the old religion is just regarded as literature in the same way you and I regard Shakespeare. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's just something you value culturally or participate in without belief. No, I don't buy it. Now, the promise of life after death, eternal. Okay, and of course, it's a promise that's false. Comes at a price. You can't have sex out of wedlock. You can't have sex before marriage. I don't even have to give you 10 other examples. I mean, of course, there's this long look at Abby Shapiro, Ben Shapiro's sister. Her whole fucking life is trying to keep this checklist. She's trying to maintain every principle in the Old Testament, and some of them she doesn't even try. I don't see her doing animal sacrifice. I don't see her, if you actually get into the list of what rituals are required of you, every meal begins and ends with prayers and superstitions and candles and how the food is prepared and how it's served. Like, there are a million things. But she ostensibly, so the only thing she has going for her is that people think she's beautiful. She either actually is a beautiful woman or people perceive her as a beautiful woman. She's a much celebrated beauty. Jesus, have you heard her sing? Terrible taste in music. She's an imbecile and just unbelievably poor taste in everything but art, music, etc. She trained to be an opera singer. It's torture to listen to that woman sing. But anyway, people perceive her as beautiful. People perceive her as sexy. She's had sex with one man. And that's all she's ever going to have. It's not, even if we just stick on the sexuality, in reality, so every element of her life is infested with superstition and ritual just for that promise of eternal life. But even if we just looked at the issue of sexuality, of that sacrifice, I don't buy it. I don't buy that that's a hole in your life that you're left hankering for, after you lose it. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a before and after. That now you live without the belief in the soul. You live without the belief in reincarnation or heaven or hell or whatever it may be. So Noel says, quote, "It was reading Sam Harris and Dawkins that deprogrammed him from religion. So he does have respect for their work." Close quote. So Noel, I got to say this. For those of you who've been watching my channel, you will have heard me say this 10 years ago. So, sorry, 8 years ago. It's not a long, long time ago. Okay. Noel, people driving down the road see a car crash and they think, I'm going to quit drinking. Don't have respect for the car crash. Okay. Real example. I've known people who said this. I'm not deeply personally. Okay. You're driving down the road and you see a slaughterhouse. Most often people just see the cows lined up to be slaughtered. They don't actually see the slaughter. Right? I've also heard stories where people saw a train crash or a truck turnover, truck that was full of pigs or something. And the animals, some of them are killed and some of them are running around scared. They see that and they think, okay, I'm going to become vegan. I'm not going to eat meat anymore. Okay. Don't respect the car crash. Don't respect the slaughterhouse. Okay. I know it's kind of unnatural for human beings, but do not make a god out of the impetus that led you to make that decision, to make that breakthrough, to have that will. There's a parable of the stone robe monk in Buddhism. Okay. And that is a monk who was cold. And so instead of lighting a fire, he got a heavy stone, got some kind of boulder, and he would lift the stone and he would walk back and forth in his cell, in his monastic hut. So naturally, he became one of the most muscular and impressive monks amongst the Buddhist monks, because this was his method of heating himself. Was instead of using fire, to use a stone. Okay, it's not the stone; it's the man that matters. Okay, it's not Sam Harris, it's not Dawkins, it's not the book. And if you don't believe me, if you go back today and read those books, I think you will laugh at them with scorn. All right, and you look at it and think, this is just a stone. I am reading through your comments now, guys, just catching up with what you said over the last hour or so. So the comment from Alexandru Perida for donated £10 sterling was, quote, "I found your channel a few months ago. You have an interesting approach to life. Why are so many atheists using intoxicants? Shouldn't they be purely logical and reasonable in theory?" So look, it's much harder to be a vegan than it is to be an atheist. Veganism requires a certain level of commitment to self-discipline and of strong will. You can't be a pushover. I mean, just even the ease with which you can go to restaurants and bars and enjoy yourself in society. Everything surrounding you is made of meat and cheese and eggs. Just the availability of processed food, the convenience of eating non-vegan food. If you're a vegan, you have this level of self-discipline where you say, no, I'm not going to do what's easy. I'm not going to do what's expedient. I'm going to do what's right. Even if it pisses off my boss at work, even if it pisses off my coworkers, even if it pisses off my mom and dad, you have that commitment, you have that self-discipline. That's what you've decided to do. It's what you want to do. You're going to do it. What percentage of vegans are sober? Huge percentage of vegans drink alcohol. Huge percentage of vegans smoke marijuana. Huge percent of vegans use even harder mind-altering drugs like ayahuasca, what's called ecstasy, MDMA. I don't want to know the percentage. Like sober vegans are a shockingly small minority of vegans. So that this is the reality of the world we live in. Now, what percentage of vegans are addicted to video games? You can get into some other categories. It's terrible. What percentage of vegans are atheists, as opposed to holding superstitious or supernatural views? So that is a much, much higher barrier to entry. Now, what is the barrier to entry to becoming an atheist? It's almost nothing. Like, I would say a very large percentage of people who call themselves atheists, they just don't care. You can be, by the way, I'm not against it. People would just say, well, my grandmother believed in that stuff, and my parents kind of tried to make me believe, but I just decided it just doesn't do anything for me. It's not really a philosophical or political commitment for them. They're just like, it's not appealing to them. They're not enthusiastic about it. Where that's all it is. It's a passive rejection of religion with no clear commitment to transforming society. Now, I'd say this also. If you live in Switzerland, being pro-democracy, you can be a completely gormless conformist. You can just be someone who goes with the flow of society as it already exists. Living in Denmark, being someone who's pro-democracy isn't some kind of challenge, right? Living in Beijing, China, you are risking your life by being pro-democracy, even if all you do is talk about it, right? It's really, even if all you do, not even on the internet, even if you are just verbally open with your friends about what your views on democracy, you just talk about the fact that you think China should have elections, you're risking your life. Okay, really, you'll be tracked and you'll be spoken to. The government will sooner or later have a word with you to let you know, that that's what you're doing. You're risking being imprisoned, so on and so forth. Now, likewise, today in Denmark, actually, I think the ultimate example will probably be Sweden and Norway. These are some of the most atheistic. Sweden, Norway, and I looked it up recently, the Czech Republic. These are some of the most atheistic countries in the world. You are risking nothing by rejecting religion or calling yourself an atheist. Okay. In Texas, you're risking something. There's risk. There's negative consequence. In Saudi Arabia, you're risking something. In Malaysia, you're risking something, right? You're to some extent putting your life on the line. You're risking really negative consequences. But with all that having been noted, okay, look, okay. Here's what an idiot would say, and now here's what I have to say. An idiot would say, well, there's no intelligence test before you get your atheist card. There's no IQ test. There's no exam to get in. Okay, here's what I have to say. I've been to Oxford University, England. I've been to Cambridge University, England, and there is an intelligence test to get in. People have to study for and write a whole series of exams to get into Oxford and Cambridge, and they're all idiots. Every single person I met who either had a PhD from Oxford and Cambridge or was in the process of getting a PhD candidates, elite level students at Oxford and Cambridge. I'm not telling you some of them are stupid. I'm telling you all of them are stupid. And some of them are a combination of stupid and insane. The people who were really fucking crazy. Any of you, there could be some people watching this who knew me in those days. Some of those guys went on to become professors themselves. Yeah, I'm saying you are a fucking retard. You and you and you, all you guys I knew face to face. One of those guys, he's now a professor here at University of British Columbia. I think you're fucking retarded, bro. I think you're that stupid, for real. Okay. So, like I'm just saying, when you see it in this context, when you see it in the context of even when there is an intelligence test, even when there is an exam to write, the vast majority of people in elite educational institutes are imbeciles. Okay. Well, yeah, there's no entrance exam for becoming an atheist. There's no entrance exam for, there's no exam for becoming a vegan either. It's a really, really tough comparison to make. Now, look, you guys might know this with me. I signed up to join the Army. I did not end up doing military service for stupid circumstances. But just a couple of years ago, when the war was against ISIS, I signed up to fight. I don't know. Every guy I've met who's been in the Army, yes, they like to complain that they had to work with stupid people in the Army. Okay. But I really don't know. I doubt it. I think if you're in the army, if you're in active service, I don't think you work with stupider people than you meet in vegan activism or animal rights activism or atheism activism. And I don't think you work with stupider people than you meet in Cambridge University, England, on campus. I don't believe that. And I'll tell you why, because it's about self-discipline. Now, I'm not saying there are no stupid people in the army. I'm saying like the level of stupidity that's normal, stupidity and malice that's normal in these supposedly elite settings, right? I think everyone wants to. Everyone has if you haven't really dealt with it face to face, you want to imagine that these places are full of intelligent, well-intentioned people. Why do you think I signed up to do humanitarian work in Cambodia and Laos? I thought I was going to be working with wonderful people. Imagine the intelligent, well-intentioned people you're going to meet doing humanitarian work in Cambodia and Laos. It's not who I met. So look, that's the answer to your question. And the next question is, what now? What next? So what are we going to do in the next 20 years? Yeah, you know what? I have just one friend who's really gone to atheist conferences, these atheist activist conferences. I only have one. But I remember talking to her, and I was talking about problems amongst so-called atheist activists. And she was just agreeing with me. She's saying, look, when you go to those conferences, a lot of the people there are getting drunk and sleeping with prostitutes. A lot of them are like these people who had some kind of repressive Christian upbringing, and now they want to use drugs, use alcohol, sleep with prostitutes, have the pleasures of the senses, the pleasures of the flesh that were denied to them before. Like, that's real, and you see it face to face, Okay, so a lot of atheists are drunks. A lot of atheists are drug addicts. A lot of atheists are whoremongers, to use a real 18th century term. Oh, there's a famous quotation. Don't have to tell the whole story behind this, where a man is accused of being a whoremonger, and he defends himself by saying, if you go into a man's house and finds that he owns only a single piece of cheese, I do not think you could very well call him a cheesemonger. Therefore, I do not think you can call me a whoremonger because I have only one whore. It's hilarious. In terms of the bizarre history of that term, yeah, okay. So a lot of atheists are whoremongers. They're overcome by the pleasures. This is okay. What now? What next? What are we going to do? And I mean, that's what all my critiques come down to. Again, whether we're talking about something like the vegan movement, we're talking about ecology. I mean, right now, you fucking tell me what just happened in Glasgow, Scotland. What did Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rebellion and all these donation collecting parasites on the ecological movement accomplish in the last 2 weeks? It's about a month, last 4 weeks, really, right? They were all featured on the news. They were all given all this support, a level of support my YouTube channel has never had, is never going to have, right? All this encouragement, support, the world's most popular cause. And they accomplished nothing. And there's no indication they are ever going to accomplish anything. There's no positive direction forward they're taking or ever going to take. Okay, well, what now? What next? I mean, I'm sitting here saying, again, the title of this video, I'm saying to you, the atheist movement is a failure. The atheist movement is dead. And now I'm asking you, what is the future of the movement going to be? And it's going to be what you and you and you decide to do with it after watching this video. All of these things, all this initiative, it comes from unique individuals, small numbers of unique individuals. That's who will make the difference around the world. And if not you, then who? Look, just put this in perspective. Do you think you are less talented than Jacqueline Glenn? Do you think you are less talented than Onision? He originally came on the scene as an atheist activist. If you guys can remember, it's a long time ago. Do you think you are less intelligent than Sam Harris? If you say yes, I don't believe you. I don't think anyone in this audience, some people haven't seen this video yet, I don't think any one of you believes you're stupider than Sam Harris. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my playlist of videos. I have a playlist of videos criticizing Sam Harris that will show you just how stupid that guy is, where I quote him and show what's wrong with his way of reasoning and things. Okay, guys, every single one of you has more potential to make this change, to lead some aspect of this movement and change the world than Sam Harris or Jacqueline Glenn. What the fuck did Jacqueline Glenn start off with? Like think about her starting position 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Every single one of you in this respect, in relation to, and what does it take? Again, there is risk. It does take nerve. It does take backbone. There are some, it does take steadfastness, but look at the losers who've been leading the movement in the last 20 years. Look ahead to the next 20 years and think about what's possible, Melissa already drew attention to it. It's easy to say that something is necessary. It's even easier to say it's inevitable. And I'm saying, look ahead to the next 20 years and you tell me what difference we're going to make. You know what's inevitable? Fucking ISIS. All right. The Islam, and that can happen again. There's no reason to think that's the last time Muslims are going to try to reinaugurate the caliphate, to go back in time and start caliphate-based government again. Have you heard? The Taliban is the government of Afghanistan again. Things can go backward anytime, bro. Look at Turkey. Turkey, the one distinguishing thing about Turkey was so-called Kemalism, whatever you want to call it, but the secular modernizing movement in Turkey. Well, you know what's happened in the last 20 years in Turkey? Look at Israel. You think Israel's going to go forward? It's going to go backward. Oh yeah, Israel could become more secular and more democratic, but it could not. Could get worse. How about Texas? Any part of the United States, Texas, Georgia. You tell me. I've drawn attention to this in many videos. People like to praise so-called BLM, Black Lives Matter. When you look at the reality on the ground of what's happening, there is no Black Lives Matter. What there are Black church groups. Almost all of the activism, almost all of the legal cases, the actual leaders, the actual organizations making things happen were Black Christian religious groups. I didn't hear about any that were Muslim just in the last couple of years. Obviously, if you go back to the 1960s, there have been times when Black Muslim groups were also a major source of activism and agitating for social and political change. So, there is nothing inevitable about the movement forward towards atheism, movement forward towards democracy, right? It's going to happen if people like you and me make it happen. Now, look, sorry, this is an aside, but it's probably the single most important part of this video. There are two moments in history where secularism could have taken over the government of a major Western democracy and changed history forever. One was the French Revolution, and one was the American Revolution. Okay, and in both cases, it didn't happen. Okay, why didn't it happen in France? Because one man named Napoleon decided to sell out the atheists, sell out the secularists, and to reestablish Catholicism in France. One man made that decision. Period. There's nothing democracy. There was no. You want to say something?
Yeah, there's something that I wanted to say, but then I forgot.
Go on.
So I was just going to say, we in America, growing up in America, I lived in a country that was supposedly had separation of church and state.
Right.
Right. But anytime some tragedy happened, all of the news reporting would say,
yes,
prayers, send prayers.
Yes.
God be with us. That is sorry.
No, the extent to which religion is just ingrained in the public discourse.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it does really depend on one person. It depends on
sure.
Okay, is
editorial policy at that.
Is the president a Christian? Like when are we going to have an atheist president?
The president, in case you didn't know, took his vows on a stack of Bibles. Every courtroom in the United States, every president. There are religious ceremonies every day that they start Congress, House of Congress, both at the state level and the federal level. They have prayers, they have religious ceremonies and invoking God. And there are polls of Americans saying, huge percentage of Americans, more than 70%, saying they would never vote for someone who was an atheist. Thus we get completely phony Christians like Bill Clinton, pretending. Anyway, you did unfortunately derail what I was saying. Do you remember where I was?
Can change with one man.
Right. Okay. So look, Napoleon was one man, and he single-handedly completely sold out and undermined and undercut and reversed the movement towards atheism that was decisively created and briefly pursued by the French Revolution. So if you don't know, that involved taking away the land owned by the church, the land and the buildings owned by the church. Yes, like included things like monasteries, but also included things like farms. And, actually taking that away and saying, you don't own that anymore. And in some cases, they were just auctioned off to the highest bidder. In other cases, they were made into hospitals or something the government needed. I think in some cases, they were made into military facilities too, because there was a lot of war at that time. But actually taking away the possessions, the wealth of the church And even though it was only for a few years, they coercively forced priests and nuns to get married. They said, no, that's over. You now have to be married and have to be a normal member of society. You are not allowed to live in celibacy. Now, they didn't actually force them to marry a particular person. You can imagine, but it's like, well, if you're a priest, you can marry one of these nuns. There was a kind of dating game that went on, but there was a government sponsored dating game of coercively, for they were actually trying to eradicate their religion. Okay. One man sold it out. Now, you tell me. Wait, you want to jump in?
What about the American Revolution?
That's what I was going. Yeah, that's what I was saying next. Okay. Do you think Benjamin Franklin believed in God? I don't. I've read his autobiography. He's polite about it, but I think it is fair to say Benjamin Franklin was basically an atheist. Okay. And if you don't know, you can look into his sex life. Okay. How about Thomas Jefferson? Certainly in today's parlance, Thomas Jefferson would be considered an atheist. I think at his own time, you might have described him as some kind of deist, having some kind of nuanced anti-clerical views. Well, you say whatever. I noticed we have 32 thumbs up. Oh, it's changed now. We have 32 thumbs up, but 31 people in the audience. So we're gonna some people gave the thumbs up and left. We have more thumbs up. But guys, if you've just joined the audience, hit thumbs up. It'll help more people discover the video. Okay, so look, obviously we could list off all of the people who participated in the American. How about Governor Morris? How about all these people were kind of on the atheist spectrum. There will be some exceptions, by the way. Sorry, I can't say everybody who was an elite level leader in the American Revolution and writing the American Constitution was an atheist. I know you tell me, do you think John Adams actually believed in God? Holy shit, what a weird guy John Adams was. Okay, so there was this moment in history where a group of secular Republican people who were of varying degrees of atheism took over the government and wrote their own constitution. And, the main missed opportunity people like to talk about has to do with slavery. Like, well, you guys were all kind of sort of opposed to slavery, but you weren't really opposed to slavery enough to make a commitment at that moment when you wrote the Constitution. Well, they were all kind of sort of opposed to Christianity, but they weren't opposed enough to make it happen. So instead, look at what we got, with the United States of America. And by the way, you can repeat that for each of the 13 colonies. I mean, I think the most secular group of legislators was the group of legislators who actually wrote the Constitution at the federal level. But state by state, some will be more secular than others. But no, America, people behave as if they have separation of church and state. If you actually read the Constitution, it's a whole other story. Sorry, I just got to say, I'm sorry if this is the recurring leitmotif of the video. Okay. What now? What next? Okay, guess what? Nobody made it easy on you. Nobody did this for you, okay? Napoleon didn't make it easy for you. Charles de Gaulle didn't make it easy for you, okay? Benjamin Franklin didn't make it easy for you, okay? It's our struggle now in the next 20 years. We've got to make it happen now. And you tell me, if not now, then when? This is 2021. We're still locked in the fucking dark ages. We are still dealing with this medieval bullshit. People are still shocked. Atheists are shocked when I say I want to abolish Christmas. Okay? They're shocked. They can't even debate or discuss it with me. Not one ever has. They reject me as an extremist. Atheists are shocked when I talk about actually shutting down religious schools, actually coercively ending religious education, actually coercively integrating people like the Mennonites, people like the Amish, people like the Hutterites, and yes, crazy Muslim groups, Orthodox Jewish groups, so on down the line, saying, oh, no, I actually don't believe those people should be allowed to brainwash their children, and I don't believe they should be able to circumcise their children, male or female. I also don't think they should be allowed to tattoo their faces, for fuck's sake. Okay? Oh, I'm an extremist. So that's where we're at in terms of the Overton window, in terms of what's considered mainstream. I'm way outside the mainstream because I'm willing to say out loud these things that are so obvious that they're written into every fucking science fiction vision of the future of planet Earth we've got, right? There is no science fiction that views it the other way. Somebody mentioned Dune. Several people mentioned Dune, right? But Dune is a future dystopia, okay? Dune is a future where there is no democracy. Dune is a future where basically the Muslims won, where basically, Muslim jihadists rule the whole universe. And it's horrible. And in case you don't know, in the first two novels, they got rid of computers. where drug addicted Muslim fundamentalists took over the universe. People who are addicted to this, mind altering hallucinogenic drug, spice, and they're crazy fun. That's the view of the world in Dune. And in case you don't know, it's just a few sentences here and there. I've heard interviews with the author where any possibility of democracy is completely dismissed. It's just a world where the only form of government is despotism. That's it. There's only despotism, nothing else. And everyone's ruled by this crazy religion, and you get to see the consequences. So, I mean, it is a dark, hopeless future that way. Okay, it's interesting counterexample, whatever you can talk about. But I'm just pointing out all of our visions of the future. Generally speaking, I don't know, Johnny Mnemonic even get into this kind of thing. Any vision, they do not show you a future that's dominated by religions. Okay, now who's going to make it happen? And I'm just being honest with you. I think when the founders of the American Constitution, when people like Benjamin Franklin were writing the Constitution, they assumed there'd be this tremendous progress in religion. I would not go so far as to say they assumed we would have an atheist society. But they had lived through about a century and a half since the English Civil War, where they'd seen tremendous innovation, diversity, and change in religion. Just that 150 years leading up to the American Revolution. I think they thought there was going to be more progress. That just as the Puritans were very different from the Catholicism of the Dark Ages, and the Puritans were a very diverse and fractious bunch, that things were going to keep on innovating. And no, that's not what happened. You had a period of innovation, and then that ossified, and it became an authoritarian patriarchal religion that continues to this day. We still have, the Mennonites haven't changed, guys. They haven't changed. None of those, the Amish haven't changed. And, to a shocking extent, we haven't changed. Oh, so there are some comments here I'm not reading because I just agree with them. Oliver has his own YouTube channel, by the way, Oliver D. Shields, if you want to go check out his YouTube channel. I promote it here pretty frequently. Quote, there is just so much to do to extirpate religious notions, especially those that have a connection with medieval religion. The thing is too, right? The nature of this work is, if you talk to someone who was raised in an orthodox religious context until they're 20 years old, it's a lot of work to deprogram them, right? Like you have someone, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, what have you, someone who went to a madrasa, someone who was raised, being inculcated with religion. Then they're 20 years old and they step into the light of day and they're blinking and looking around and trying to face up to the reality of modern life. That's hard. And by the way, that goes on with trying to deprogram terrorists, deprogram fundamentalists. Because some people, they go a certain ways down the road to fundamentalism and terrorism and extremism. And someone has to try to educate them. No, look, this is how life on earth works. Guess what? You are a monkey. We all are. Guess what? And it's very hard for them to deal with. But the flip side of that is when people just grow up without that. Again, this is why I don't believe there is a God-shaped hole to fill. When people just grow up without that bullshit, all this stuff is a 5-minute conversation, 2-minute conversation. Oh yeah, in the past, people used to cut part of their dick off. People used to cut part of their penis off for really incoherent reasons in the Old Testament. It's never even really explained in the Old Testament. But, it's symbolically represented, the deal made between Abraham and God. You are not going to have a problem talking someone out of circumcision who was born and raised atheist. And you're going to have a huge problem when you have a civilization of millions of people who are willing to fight and die to protect their right to engage in circumcision. And they're still willing to fight and die over the headscarf in order to conceal women's hair in public. Those are fighting words. Those people. So, I'm just saying, like, there's this, in terms of when you're looking at the generational change, when are we going to make this difference? The reality is, Europe and America, they're becoming more and more Muslim, not less and less so, primarily through immigration, but to some extent through conversion, and to a large extent through the delusion of multiculturalism, that we're enriching our society by making it more Muslim. No, we enrich our society by making it less Christian. Bringing in foreign cultures was only useful and positive in as much as it challenged our overly comfortable assumptions about our own religious tradition. Like, having more Chinese people move into your community is good if it creates atheism, if it makes you look at your own cultural traditions and think, wow, this is crap. then it's positive. If 10 million Chinese people immigrated to Afghanistan, that could improve Afghanistan because it would make it less Muslim and probably result in a lot of Muslims reflect. And again, it doesn't have to be Chinese. It could be 10 million Japanese people or something. People from a more modern, more secular, more atheistic society, and a society that has radically different cultural traditions. Like, oh, gee, you guys do this mooncake festival. Huh, well, that's kind of stupid, but our traditions are stupid too. Things could change, right? But it's not because more superstition is good. It's not because more religion or more diversity of religion is good. Multiculturalism is only good in as much as it eliminates the host culture, and the host culture is, based on superstitious nonsense from the Dark Ages. Catching up with your comments, guys. So, guys, sorry, I appreciate you're saying these comments, all right? Because I'm going to give you my real. So I don't know if you're still in the audience. Some of these comments from a long time ago. A guy named Matt made this comment. Matt Angiono. So I'm just going to highlight you in case you're still there. I'm going to reply to your comment now, Matt. You mentioned some other YouTuber or podcaster, and I think I've seen this name before. And you say, oh, he's currently doing lots of interviews with this stuff. Okay. Matt, nobody is going to help me. Nobody. Okay? Not Jacqueline Glenn, not Anissian, not Richard Dawkins. Nobody. Get it through your fucking skull. I'm on this microphone alone for a fucking reason. Okay? You think I wanted this format? You think I wouldn't rather have a round table? You think I wouldn't rather have a show like The Young Turks with 20 people collaborating, cooperating? You think when I started doing YouTube, I expected to be working alone? No. Matt, nobody is going to help me. Not even you. All right? So what I really have to say, you mentioned this fucking podcast or YouTube or whatever you think is going to help you out. No, Matt. No. Either you are or fucking nobody is going to do it. And fuck you for taking your duty, your obligation, your opportunity, and putting it up on this guy, John. Okay? And if any of you said the same thing, I mean, it's ridiculous. Nobody would say it. Nobody would say, oh, hey, you can do a podcast with Richard Dawkins or you could do a podcast with Jacqueline Glenn. Nobody's going to say that in this audience. The people I have are too high a level of erudition and cynicism to suggest such a thing. But I will say the same thing to you. I'll say, oh no, what about you? What about your podcast? What about your political organization? Why haven't you incorporated a charity? Why haven't you created an activist organization? Whatever it's going to be. Why don't you create the atheist equivalent to the YMCA? Where the fuck is that? Where is a militant, atheist, nihilist, anti-religious organization that has a gym I can go to? And where you say, no, fuck the YMCA, fuck Christianity. We are the opposite of the YMCA, right? Where I was in Toronto, there was a Jewish competitor to the YMCA, and it was from the old days. Back, these institutions, they all used to be anti-Semitic. They all used to be anti-Semitic, and they all used to be racist. It makes sense. If you have a Catholic organization, it's only for Catholics. If you have a Christian organization, I don't really begrudge them being anti-Semitic. It excludes Jews because it says Christian on the sign. That's all it is. But from the old days, in Toronto, there was a Jewish counterage, and I forget. It wasn't called the Young Jewish Association, but it was a Jewish health club with a gym, okay? And I was like a little kid when I was learning about this. And I remember thinking this through. And at first you think, oh, wow, that's great. So Judaism is challenging Christianity. No, it's not. It's bad and evil and wrong. I don't want to live in a world where in one city, in downtown Toronto, there's a Jewish gym and a Christian gym and a Muslim gym and a Hindu gym and a Chinese gym. I don't want to live in a society based on religious bigotry. Okay? Do you? Does that sound good to you? What's the fucking improvement compared to black versus white segregation? I don't want to live in a world built on religious segregation. No, I want to live in a world where atheists get organized, where nihilistic atheists get organized, and they're really willing to fucking live by their values and say, no, we are the gym that's not going to put up Christmas decorations, and it's not going to pussyfoot about it. We're going to openly say we exist to destroy Christianity. We don't want to live in the Dark Ages anymore. This is a gym for people who don't live in the Dark Ages. I'm just being real with you. I don't think that exists anywhere in the fucking world. All right. I don't think it exists in Los Angeles. I don't think it exists in the Czech Republic. I don't think it exists in Sweden. Okay. I think the nearest you're going to find, there was a group of positivists, the followers of Auguste Comte, who briefly tried to do that and fizzled out in like 20 years. This is a century ago. There was a positivist group that tried to challenge religion, that would be having this kind of anti-religious organization that was legally, it was a religion unto itself. And the only thing you're going to find are going to be some of the communist and socialist organizations, which I'm also opposed to. I'm an anti-communist and I'm an anti-socialist. But, maybe you can find this. Okay. So I'm just saying, fuck you. Nobody is going to do this shit for you. Napoleon didn't do it for you. Benjamin Franklin didn't do it for you. But also these other fucking social media influencers aren't going to do it for you. And guys, you think it's easy for me? So how long have I been on YouTube? Is it 8 years now? It's approximately 8 years I've been on YouTube. Do you think I ever fucking imagined I'd be sitting here alone after 8 years? All right. So I live in a small city. There are 100,000 people in this city. Okay. I am not bragging. I'm one of the most famous people in this city. Okay. It's a small city. I don't have a lot of competition. I really don't. Who is a more famous YouTuber from Victoria, Canada, this city, than me? Okay. And now within a given category, I think I am the most famous atheist YouTuber from Victoria. I may be the most famous author, like author of books, the most famous political author, the most famous person writing books about politics in Victoria. If I have any competition, it'll be because somebody retired here. We have a lot of elderly people. Like there could be someone who's successful and they retired, right? Like what do you want me to fucking say? It's a small town full of fucking losers with no ambition. Okay. I'm the most famous vegan here. I'm the most famous atheist. Like there are some things. Okay. Yeah. What I've created here is a crossroads, and I've been in and out of this town for fucking 8 years, and I've been at the university. So on. Do you think I ever imagined I'd be isolated this way? You don't think it was reasonable for you to imagine I would meet ambitious people on the university campus who would want to do podcasts with me, or want to do roundtable discussions, or want to do YouTube videos, or want to get organized, or want to create a foundation, even to stick with that example, create an alternative to the YMCA, create an atheist institution of religion. Okay, bro, it doesn't exist. It has never happened for me. It is never going to happen for me. And it's partly your fault. It's people like you, right? You guys remember a couple months ago, I made the video talking about global warming. And this same kind of thing came up where at some point I've got to point the finger at my audience and say, look, guys, not even one of you is going to send me an email trying to get organized, trying to get involved, and trying to talk to me about something positive you want to do. Nobody's actually going to do jack shit. You're going to listen to this video while you're fucking washing the dishes. You're going to put the dishes away. You're going to say, oh, that was a good video. And you're going to go back to your life of fucking, I don't know, cocaine and blowjobs, whatever the fuck you're into, man. You're all going to go back to watching touch football on TV, whatever the fuck you're into. I don't know. That is the reality. Okay. So look, I know how reassuring it would be. Dude, when I first started this channel, so this is getting back to a narrative loop that started over an hour ago. When I first started this channel, I had just separated from my wife. I was alone. I had more time. And the whole atheist subcategory on YouTube was kind of popping. There's a lot of interest, a lot of activity. Okay. I phoned up and I emailed and I got in touch with, back then people used Facebook groups of like Facebook messaging for a special page. I got in touch with the atheist podcast, the atheist radio shows. Some of them were literally on radio, but a lot of them were like a radio show that was broadcast on YouTube and as a podcast. I got in touch with those guys partly because I said, look, I have a background as a scholar of Buddhism. I wasn't just a normal Buddhist. I was a scholar of Buddhism. And now I'm an ex-Buddhist. And I want to talk about loss of faith and religion in relation to Buddhism. And like many of these guys, I was able to write them and say, look, I see you've done 300 episodes of your show. You've never had one talking about Buddhism. They've like all been about Christianity, or like 90% of them are Christianity and 5% are Judaism and 5% are Islam or something like that. You know what I mean? So I was writing in saying, look, I can really offer something valuable. Can I collab with you? Can I do an interview with you? Okay. Not even one positive response ever. All right. You guys know I did a series of videos and there's going to be more because it's now November. I've done a series of videos talking about abolishing Christmas and replacing Christmas with something better, creating new holidays, new literature, new poetry, new children's fables to challenge the culture of Christmas. I have not had one positive response, not one interview, invitation to collab, any level. from any other social media influencer, any other author of books, anything, any publisher. I've been talking about publishing books for years. Do you think one fucking person attached to any publisher anywhere in the world has ever gotten in touch with me positively? Whether about atheism, veganism, children's story books, like all these projects. So you think I've got one person ever cooperating with me or supporting me? Not one. So, homie, I am alone on this mic for a fucking reason, okay? Talent is scarce. I'll say this, guys, I don't need the money, but I think you should support me on Patreon. I think you should, precisely for this reason, precisely because it is so fucking scarce. If I were you, I would get on Patreon and support à-bas-le-ciel just for that reason. Because hey, look around. Jacqueline Glenn, where is she now? I mean, make a fucking long list of examples. Where is she now? What do you think she's going to do in the next 5 years? Nothing. Oh, hey, this is one guy who's hungry. This is one guy who's ambitious. And I don't know what he's going to do in the next 5 years. Okay? That alone is a fucking reason for you to support me on Patreon. Your $5 probably will not make any fucking difference to me. Okay? But I'm just being real with you. If I were in the audience, I would want to support me. And, and if you're supporting Jacqueline, any of these fucking guys, where do you think your money is going when you support Sam Harris? When you pay for his fucking guided meditation podcast, when you donate money to support him doing a long form monologue about his hallucinatory experiences using mind-altering drugs, using magic mushrooms, LSD, this kind of. What do you think you're fucking supporting when you support Sam Harris? What do you think Sam Harris is going to accomplish in the next 5 years? Okay? Jack shit. All right? I just say this. If any of you are connected to a publisher, just something as simple as that. Do you know a publisher who would handle dissident literature, who would publish my works on politics? Do you know a publisher who would publish my works, children's storybooks? I had this storybook about Socrates. It's a replacement for Christmas fables. They're fables about Socrates, illustrated poems for children. I have a storybook about veganism or whatever. I mean, some of my stuff is, saleable in that sense. And some of my stuff is really disturbing, hard-hitting political commentary and analysis. You fucking tell me, guys. All right? And look, do you want me to make another bet? The last time we did this, when I did the live stream on global warming, I said not one person is going to write to me about this. And instead, I'm only going to get email from people who want to have sex with me or want to talk to me about my sex life, want to gossip about my sex life. What do you think I lost that fucking bet? What do you know? Okay, so there are some other interesting comments here. Carl Grimes says, quote, I think Eisel is at a disadvantage here in that he wasn't raised religious. The experience most ex-Christians have is that of having a hole, a God-shaped hole in their life, something lacking. Carl, so I disagree because I think I grew up with all the disadvantages of Judaism, all the disadvantages of Christianity, all the disadvantages of watching mainstream television, reading Batman comic books, all that mainstream cultural stuff, plus communism. I was raised by devout extremist communists. But, communism doesn't exclude Christianity and Judaism. The majority of communists continue to have religious views and religious rituals and so on. And I grew up with Baruch Atah Adonai. I grew up with Hebrew prayer and the Hebrew God. I have all those disadvantages. So no, Carl, I totally understand. I totally understand why you assume that about me. No, it's just that you know me in a time in my life where I'm atheist, I'm openly nihilistic, and I'm mad as hell. So you don't get that vibe from me. But I understand it all. I understand it all too well. And look, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, right? I mean, like if I'm wrong, what a wonderful fucking world we live in. But I think all of you are here. You don't really believe I'm wrong. Like, does anyone believe these problems are just going to go away by themselves? Yeah. So comment from Rasmus. I mentioned, an hour ago or something, people who pray and actually hear the voice of God in response to their prayer. And he says, quote, "It's funny how biased psychiatry is, because hearing a voice would be considered schizophrenia or schizophrenic disorder unless it's the Judeo-Christian God, unless it's in this context of prayer." Yeah, well, take a look at research on fucking Buddhist meditation. All the stuff, that's all the transcendental experiences reported from Buddhist and modern Hindu meditation. All of that stuff would be considered insanity, but it has this religious context. And so people even praise it as if it's science, as if it's a therapeutic form of scientifically valid experience, a valid praxis, I want to say. Okay, I guess I didn't realize just how many comments I've got here to catch up with. Thanks to you all guys for contributing to the conversation. And thanks for the thumbs up. We now have 46 people in the audience and 48 thumbs up. I mean, one of the reasons why I appreciate the thumbs up is that I just say, I am aware that I am a minority within a minority within a minority here. I'm aware that my views are unpopular amongst atheists. My views about veganism are unpopular amongst vegans. Like, I get that. So when I say I appreciate you guys giving it the thumbs up, it's because I really think that is, and if you know someone to share the link with, share the link. I think there's no point, sharing the link with people who don't want to hear it. But if you have a friend where oh, hey, my friend James, he's going to appreciate this or something, by all means, Okay, so guys, there were a lot of interesting comments. I appreciate it. I was afraid I'd have nothing. I thought this would be a 30-minute live stream. Carl Grimes says, quote, "One assumption Eisel has is that talent is of primary importance, whereas he thinks time and place is what allows people to change the world." So this is Carl speaking, not me. Carl says talent is ever present. The opportunity for change is not. Voltaire. Why and how did Voltaire change the world? I've read Voltaire's first book, which is not, none of his books are well written. No, it's talent that's scarce. It's talent that changes the world. Bullshit, Carl. Now, Carl, so I don't know how old you are, but I assume you're older than 20. Okay. If you look back at the last 20 years, we've had everything we needed to change the world. Everything. We've had the opportunity of a century. What I want to say, the opportunity of a millennium. Okay. There's nothing like, and we've had tools at our disposal to get organized and meet like-minded people, including YouTube here. We've had these amazing opportunities the last 20 years. I mean, the difficulty of printing and sharing a pamphlet in the 18th century, that's how Voltaire's ideas spread. People would physically print pamphlets and share them in coffee shops, in coffee houses in Paris. That was how information had to travel. It was crazy. And live theater, you'd write a script and perform it live and take it on the road. Like, it was unbelievably hard work to spread ideas. Okay. No, we've had every opportunity in the last 20 years. We could have changed life in America. We could have changed life in Europe. We could have changed life in Afghanistan. Okay. And we didn't. All right. Now, you want to get into communist China? It's even more depressing. Look at the opportunity. No. Okay, Carl, and the topic of today's discussion is even more telling. There is no time for atheism. There is no place for atheism. Okay, there is no adventitious opportunity for atheism. All right, exactly what's scarce is talent. Sorry. When do you think there's going to be a better opportunity to spread atheism in Afghanistan? When do you think there's going to be a better opportunity to spread atheism in Central Asia? When do you think there's going to be a better opportunity to spread atheism in Syria? Okay, how about North Africa? We can extend this to the area, generally speaking, where the so-called, I forget the name of the uprisings now. The 2011 uprisings took place. The Arab Spring, that's what they call it, the so-called Arab Spring uprising. Okay. Really? Do you think there has ever been a better time than the last 20 years to promote atheism in Egypt? I mean, any of these examples, Libya. Think you're going to get a better chance? Really? Okay. But being honest, United States of America, And I mean, again, we saw that briefly, whatever, 2015 or something, maybe 2013 on YouTube. We saw the way in which just the existence of internet technology could amplify and share and energize atheism as a movement. And why did it stop? Why didn't it go further? Like, you can look at what happened in atheism from the year 2000 to the year 2012, let's say, right? So Sam Harris has a hit book, all this stuff, The Four Horsemen. Oprah Winfrey features, okay, maybe I'm lying. I actually don't know if Oprah Winfrey featured those books. I shouldn't say that. But anyway, mainstream television, New York Times bestseller list, Richard Dawkins and all that explodes around this time. You know, The Da Vinci Codes is a hit book. I mean, there's a particular, why didn't it go further? Okay. My answer is precisely lack of talent. Okay. Yeah. And sure, that applies. I could now get into an analysis of what happened in Buddhism. Okay. What do you think is going to be better in the next 20 years that was lacking in the last 20 years? So, you're damn right. What's scarce is exactly talent. Okay, so interesting. Another comment from the same guy. Carl Grimes says, quote, "The fact that religion is a cultural universal should tell you something about how fundamental it is to the human experience." Okay, Carl, how about murder? Is murder universal? How about tooth decay? How about rape? How about war? How about holding animals in captivity and killing them to eat their flesh or to eat their eggs? Like, do you know how weak the argument is that something is universal? How about revenge? You know what I mean? And let me just give you the world's simplest counter argument. You say religion is a cultural universal, that's universally true of all cultures in plain English. Okay. I think that the struggle of atheism against religion is a cultural universal. And I don't think there's any counter argument to that. It has occurred in all cultures at all times, including within Islam. So, murder has always existed, and the opposition to murder has always existed. Rape has always existed. The opposition to rape has always existed. Tooth decay has always existed. And dentistry and the opposition to tooth decay, at least for the last century, has existed. That's a relatively recent discovery. Okay, yeah, we live with a balance. Okay, now tell me something. If you go to Iran today, who are the atheists? Right? Do you think they're the stupidest people? Okay, I think they're the best people. I think the people in Iran today who are atheists, they are either the people who are the most brilliant or the people who are just the most strong-willed, right? Go back in time 1 century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries. Same question, same answer, okay? So I'm asking you, which side are you on? Now, I don't know where you even learned this language of talking about cultural universals, facts that are universals about all cultures, okay? Slavery existed in all cultures until we eradicated it. All right. Gender inequality. I mean, that's a very vague term, but women not having the right to vote, women not having the right to work without their husband owning and controlling them like a slave was universal to all cultures. Take a look at the status of women in 15th century China, 15th century Western Europe, 15th century Arabia, 15th century India, 15th century South America. Okay, so you can say oppression of women. I mean, it's a little bit vague, but gathering together many phenomena into one. And really it's worth talking about. There are people who will tell you seriously that the status of women in China was worse than it was under Islam at that time, because they did things like breaking their feet. The broken feet of women being foot. It's difficult. I know I'm using more clear terms. Most people haven't heard of foot binding. Let's just use the academic term foot binding. But breaking women's feet with a metal rod and folding them over and forcing them into bandages so they grow in this deformed state. There were some really uniquely terrible things with the status of women in pre-modern China. Oh, okay. Gee, what happened? We made it fucking illegal. We made foot binding illegal. China made opium illegal. At least 25% of the adult population of China had become opium addicts. Okay, they had a 25% addiction rate. Okay, and they made it illegal. And today, a tiny percentage of the Chinese are addicted to opium. It's not even 1%. There's a trace number of people. How many people in China have broken feet, foot binding? 0. Okay. Oh, gee, how much slavery is there in the United States of America today? So what the fuck do you think it means? What the fuck does it mean in your mind when you say something is a cultural universal? Guess what? We can overcome tooth decay, motherfucker. We can overcome slavery. We can go from having a society where rape is the norm, where it's universal, where virtually every good-looking woman has lived through being raped repeatedly, to it being something incredibly marginal and rare in society, something extraordinary. Do I think we can ever totally eliminate it? I don't even think we can totally eliminate slavery. I mean, slavery, I think, will never be 0 on planet Earth. But it can go from being the predominant system of social organization to being something, incredibly rare. Okay, and that is what can happen to religion too. Right? And it's going to be coercive. Sure, it's partly going to happen through public education and outreach, through enlightenment, if you want to use those terms, But sure, it's partly going to be coercive. And that's what was true with China getting rid of opium and China getting rid of foot binding and a lot of these things, a lot of these transformations. But I just say, when you say something is fundamental to the human experience, what does that mean to you? Because it doesn't mean the same thing to me. All right. When I was a child, I thought about revenge. Like 8 years old. Like, I'm being real with you. Already at age 11, revenge didn't really make sense to me anymore. But like 7 years old, 8 years old, revenge. That makes sense to a child. I've always said communism, I think, is really appealing to children and people who have childish ways of thinking. Okay. Like, I'm in my 40s now. Nothing could seem more laughable or contemptible than revenge, the desire for revenge, that revenge be gratified. There are some cultures that still have the vendetta, the belief in revenge. Afghanistan is one of them. They're a very powerful vendetta culture, revenge culture, and sometimes this is glossed as honor killing in Muslim culture. And there are cultures where the consensus opinion of mature adults is that revenge is something really very childish and contemptible, or something medieval, something to be looked down upon. Okay. And change is possible. All right. And that has come about through coercion. I mean, it has come about through real legal and government change, not just through education or cultural change, of eradicating the culture of one man challenging another to a duel and so on, of honor killings, vendettas, and revenge and so on. But when you say something is fundamental to the human experience, I do not know why or how in your mind that justifies anything at all. But that must mean to you something it doesn't mean to me. Look, stupidity is fundamental to the human experience, but you can overcome it. Ignorance is fundamental to the human experience. You can overcome it. If you are telling me that people talking to their imaginary friend is fundamental to the human experience, people taking a lamb and strapping it down to an altar and cutting its throat so that the blood spurts and flows, and saying that they're killing the lamb so that their imaginary friend will do a favor for them. If you're saying that's fundamental to the human experience, it doesn't just exist in ancient Judaism, and thus carries on in some forms Judaism, Christianity, and Islam today. Ancient China, look at animal sacrifice in ancient China, ancient India too, although they're less comfortable with it. Okay. Ancient India, did you know this? Hinduism had a ritual of raping a horse. Okay. The Celts in Europe had something not really similar, but they also had a ritualized form of raping horse. You think that's fundamental to the human experience? We talked about human sacrifice before. That existed in Tibet. It existed in Mesoamerica. What are you saying is fundamental to the human experience? Ignorance is fundamental to the human experience. Stupidity is fundamental to the human experience. You can get over it. I was 7 years old once. I was 8 years old once. I got over it. I never believed in talking to my imaginary friend. I never did. A lot of people did. A lot of people as small children had that kind of experience or that kind of imagination. Okay, you get over it. You know what you're. You know, I'm sorry. Like, you know, when you look at rapists or something too, I think, you know, part of their problem is that they have a fundamentally childish and irresponsible view of the world. You know, they're not sophisticated enough intellectually to realize, hey, I don't want to live in a society that's full of rapists. You know what I mean? Like this is something, you know, damaging and hurtful and evil, and short-term thinking. You know, they personally may feel this desire and want to gratify it, but that, like, there are these sophisticated adult reasons not to do this, right? You know, so I'm sorry, but, you know, anything you're going to say is fundamental to human experience. Anything you're saying that's you're going to say that's universal to cultures, right? It's just stupidity. Now, sorry, but again, in case you guys don't know, I am vegan. Wearing leather is universal to the human experience. It's universal to all cultures. Okay? Think about this. Okay. Hercules killed a lion, and he used his sword to cut off its skin, to pull out its organs. Why don't you just visualize yourself doing that? Pulling the organs out of the corpse of a lion and cutting away the muscle tissue and the sinew, and you take out the rib cage and you take out the spine. Okay. And he made the lion's skin into a cape, and he made its head into a hat. Do you think he looked cool? Can you imagine a dorky little kid going around wearing the skull of a lion, like a taxidermist's preserved lion skull on its head and a cape? Oh, look at me. You know, it's barbaric. It's childish. You think he looked tough? Do you think he looked, oh, wow. Oh, he killed a lion, that guy. Anyone can kill a lion. Anyone with a bow and arrow can kill a lion. Right? It's not a test of skill or a test of strength. You fucking kid. Yeah, okay, you killed a lion. And then you're wearing its skin over your skin. You know, yeah, sure, that's universal to all cultures. People used to think it was cool to kill a cow and then walk around with its skin on their body. Kill a deer. All right, we got over it. Vegans got over it. We're willing to see as absurd and barbaric things that other people don't see the absurdity and barbarism of. All right, yeah. What you say is universal to human experience. What's universal to all cultures? So Rasmus A, welcome back to the crowd. I think I saw you here months and months ago, but it's been a long time since I've seen Rasmus. Rasmus A says, quote, atheism has nothing to do with certainty. It's simply not subscribing to any religious beliefs. So he's basically talking about being agnostic as opposed to being a Gnostic atheist. Okay, Rasmus. So I have two things to say to you. One is, descriptively, this further establishes why it's so hard to organize atheists to be positively motivated and form foundations to change the world. They may have nothing in common except that they don't care for religion. So it's even less than what you're describing. They may not even reject the existence of God. They just don't like it. They're just not into it. You know, like it's a really low level of rejection. Just, they don't go to church. They don't like the song and dance, whatever. They may have never really even thought about it. They may not take any position on these. It's true. So it's hard to form a movement that's defined negatively, and it's hard to form a movement out of people who have very little in common positive. Okay. And the second thing I have to say to you is, so the fuck what? How fucking stupid are you to point at the dictionary definition of atheism? Is that going to be the limit of your ambitions in life? Like, oh, well, technically atheist. Dude, how many million people are going to have half their dick cut off this year due to fucking circumcision? Oh, well, when you look up the definition of atheism, it's not actually opposed to circumcision. That's true. And it's shocking to me how stupid people are. I've spoken to atheists who are pro-circumcision. It blows my mind. Okay, you can talk to atheists who believe in yoga. You can talk to atheists who believe in meditation. You can talk to atheists who believe in prayer. You can talk to atheists who still believe in praying to a higher power that they call the universe, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fuck you. All right, dictionary definition of atheism. All you're demonstrating here is that the word atheism is not remotely sufficient to describe the ambition to have a secular society, to have a truly atheistic world, right? Okay, so get rid of the word. We can use nihilism, so what? We can use more words that have more ambition. What I'm talking about in this whole video is actually destroying the church, is actually destroying religious education. I think that the saddest thing of all about atheism is really properly called atheist solipsism, which is the attitudes of most atheists. Most atheists simply have the attitude of, oh, well, it's okay for you to send your children to a madrasa. It's okay for you to send your children to a Catholic school, as long as I personally get to live my enlightened life as an atheist. This is a kind of solipsism in that you're treating yourself as the only thing that matters. I know this is not true dictionary definition solipsism or university chalkboard definition solipsism, but there is a great deal of fatuous self-indulgence in atheism. But, what do you think? Do you think the dictionary definition of atheism is going to define the remit, limit, or, the upper peak of what your ambitions will reach toward? I'm pointing back to the French Revolution and saying, hey, that's what the French Revolution accomplished. Can't we do better than that? So the other guy who talked about talent versus opportunity, what do you think the opportunity was in 1789 that we don't have now in 2021? Are you fucking kidding me? Do you have any idea how hard it was to create an atheist society in 1789, 1790, 1791, around there? It took a few years to get rolling. Do you think they had an advantage? They had a better opportunity, a better situation than we have today? You're fucking dreaming. They couldn't imagine being in an opportunity as having the opportunities we have today. They were in a situation where literally, all of the neighboring countries were willing to go to war with them to reestablish the power of the Catholic Church. It's very understandable. Their neighboring countries included Italy. In case you didn't know, they were surrounded by pious Christian countries, mostly Catholic, some Protestant. The Protestant Reformation is already a factor at that time. Who were really willing to snuff out the French Revolution in the name of the one true God or the one true church. We're not in that situation today. Okay, so I'll just say this briefly. Someone in the audience called Little Water. Little Water says, quote, that he is mostly agnostic, but humanity makes him an atheist at the worst of times, close quote. Okay, Water, fuck your agnosticism. Okay? If I ask you, hey, I have a son. Do you think I should circumcise him? Yes or no? Are you agnostic? Okay. Oh, I have a son. Do you think I should send him to a madrasa to have a Muslim fundamentalist education? Are you agnostic? Oh, hey, I'm going to go on vacation this year. I have 3 options. I can go to Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, or Thailand. Where do you think I should go? Are you agnostic? Oh, hey, I got bad news for you. You have no choice. You either have to spend the rest of your life in Denmark or Malaysia. Are you agnostic? You're not agnostic. You're living a fucking lie. Okay? You are an atheist. The choices you make in your own life for yourself and others, you're just a lazy, self-centered, self-indulgent atheist. You won't commit to true atheism, or I may say nihilism. And true atheism is destructive. It's not passive and self-indulgent. It makes you want to actually go out in the world and close down the madrasas, close down the Muslim schools and the Catholic schools that are creating a new generation of fundamentalists. Sorry, but that's the reality of what atheism is. And I mean, whether we talk about male circumcision, female circumcision. Oh, hey, Little Water. So you say you're just an agnostic. Oh, okay. My next door neighbors are devout Hindus, and they're raising their daughter to live in celibacy until she has an arranged marriage. Are you agnostic? How about you actually participate in any of these rituals, like even the simplest of magical rituals, not even getting into human sacrifice or animal sacrifice. Oh, do you believe in this? Do you believe in this magical ritual? But no, you don't. You believe in ghosts? You're not agnostic. All right. You are a Gnostic atheist or even a Gnostic nihilist, because it goes way beyond refusing to believe in God. You don't believe in any of this stuff. Do you believe in Yetis? Do you believe in the abominable snowman? Do you believe in Bigfoot? Do you believe in leprechauns? All right. It goes way beyond atheism, your actual position. Within Buddhism, we have all that shit still. We have many magical creatures, not just, it's not based on the existence of one God. So that's not the reality of your position. But the question is, what are you willing to fucking do about it? And what I know about you is you're not even willing to say that you're an atheist. So fuck you. So you're a coward. So you're a person with no backbone or no will or no self-discipline, right? Or no ambition to change the world, no ambition to even take that risk yourself, to stick your neck out there and say, yeah, you're an atheist, or yeah, you're a nihilist, or yeah, you think the world would be better if there were not Catholic schools where children were educated by nuns. Look, I just mentioned on that specific topic, a really interesting example is Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, he was raised by Catholic nuns. He did go to Catholic school, and he is now an atheist after many years of being religious. So he actually made films about religion back when he still believed in religion. But I notice, even though he is now an atheist, he still has this very strange fondness for Catholic schools and nuns, and Catholic institutions still kind of supports them, which, and I think that's just because of his own kind of happy childhood memory that particular nuns were caring and loving to him, or what have you. It comes up from time to time. So, I just say there are people in that kind of strange, conflicted situation. But anyway, I don't know you, Little Water. I don't know this commenter, but I don't think that's you. Or I don't think you're someone who is agnostic and is perfectly comfortable with millions of children being raised in the Catholic Church system of schools, being raised in schools where they're indoctrinated with Catholic beliefs and only live their whole life surrounded by Catholic children and Catholic teachers and Catholic nuns, where that's the context they're raised in, and that they're told evolution is only a theory, et cetera, where they're basically, however politely given, anti-science, anti-religion views. And of course, with Islam, it's worse. And there are various forms of Christianity that are worse too. Get into particular sects, and there are definitely forms of whatever you say, fundamentalist Judaism, Orthodox Judaism that are worse. So there's a whole spectrum of views that go way beyond Kevin Smith's experiences, Joe. Okay, so Matt Angiono says, quote, if there's an alternative to religion that offers the same benefits, it's much more likely to become widespread and get people to drop the false beliefs. Bullshit. So Matt, why didn't you open an atheist alternative to the YMCA? And again, this is not something that's tacitly or quietly atheist. Something that declares that it's atheist or declares that it's nihilist. Young Nihilist Association. Okay. And they got a swimming pool and they got a gym. If you did, who joins the nihilist gym? Who joins the atheist gym? People who are already atheists, people who are already nihilist. Nobody converts to atheism. Nobody converts to nihilism so that they can go to the gym. Bullshit. And I think on some fucking level, you know it. All right. Now, the actual percentage of atheists in the United States is small. Alexa, what percentage of Americans are atheists?
Here's something I found on the web. According to speakingtree.in, according to the Pew Research Center, atheists make up a very small portion of the American population, around 3%.
Alexa, stop. 3%, according to my robot companion here. Okay, let's pretend the Pew Research Group knows what they're talking about. Let's pretend 3% of Americans are atheist. What percentage of famous people on television are atheist? It's a huge percentage. Like, even for me growing up, someone like Jerry Seinfeld is the representative of Judaism. Like, you get the impression that Jerry Seinfeld is a normal Jewish person, not Ben Shapiro. Graham, this is true. The type of people who become Hollywood entertainers, stand-up comedians, news broadcasters, what have you. You are dealing with a much more secular, distorted world. on television, the whole world of celebrities. Now, you're also dealing with a higher percentage of people who are drug addicts, different kinds of reckless, self-destructive behaviors are also overrepresented amongst these kinds of public figures, right? Okay. Do you think anyone becomes an atheist because they watched Jerry Seinfeld on TV? Do you think anyone becomes an atheist because they watched Beverly Hills 90210? You know, like, so much of mainstream media is already, in effect, militating for a more secular atheist world. I mean, comedy, movies, whatever. I mean, stand-up comedians. I mean, and I think that's because of the philosophical significance of nihilism. I think a lot of comedy, think about what you're doing as a stand-up comic. You're challenging the status quo from the perspective of someone who is more nihilistic than it. Even if you believe, like Chris Rock believes in something. But when Chris Rock talks about Black Power movements, when Chris Rock talks about the Black Panthers, right? He's doing it from a nihilistic perspective. He's doing it from the perspective of a black guy who thinks this is all bullshit. You know what I mean? He's poking fun at it that way. In the same way, most of the norms of our society are challenged in comedy. They're challenged in narrative fiction. All right. So the most exclusive club in the world that is simultaneously the most promoted. Okay, what percentage of people in porn do you think are atheists? What percentage of people making any kind of erotic cinema? You name it. Okay. It doesn't work. All right. Now, look, guys, I'm still down for making a gymnasium for atheists to go to, but I have no delusion. Nobody is going to convert to atheism because you open the gym, and what drive do human beings have that's more powerful than sexuality? Like, so you have a situation where people can either live in celibacy or become an atheist and have sex with anyone they want. That's a pretty powerful reason to become atheist. And 3% of people took that deal. Okay. So you want to talk about, you've just said to me, if there's an alternative to religion that offers the same benefits, are you fucking kidding me? How about the benefit of having gay sex if you're homosexual? Well, atheism doesn't have to offer the same benefits as religion. We have better benefits. So you're homosexual, so you can live a self-hating life of celibacy, or you can come over to our team, become an atheist, and have all the gay sex you want. Okay, you're a normal, vanilla, heterosexual male. You can live in misery and celibacy and have no sex outside of marriage, or you can come over to our team, become an atheist, have all the sex you want. This is not the only example. Okay, no, I just do not believe you. Nobody is going to sign up for atheism or to create a better world, for that reason. And again, I don't even believe, I remember reading studies about this in England. I don't believe it's the case that you get a better quality of education by going to religious schools than secular schools, even within England. That's where I've seen the studies done. They really say, no, the quality of education is not better, not even at an English Catholic school or English, Protestant school. So, obviously within Canada or anywhere else in the world, it's even more extreme. So no, you're not missing out. It's not that you have to provide something. But sure, you tell me, you guys know anywhere in the world, atheist private school system, nihilist private school? You know anyone raising money for that? You know anyone getting organized to provide aggressively, militantly atheist, pro-science, anti-religion education? So someone named Raph, I assume short for Raphael, says quote, Benjamin Franklin in his biography does not sound like an atheist in this way that we understand today, close quote. Or, Raph, I don't think you've read the book, or maybe you read it 20 years ago and you forget. I read it recently. No, I mean, very clearly, Benjamin Franklin is an atheist in that book. And again, I hate to tell you this, but take a look at his sex life. Oh, TCAT asks a great question. He says, quote, do you think that a lot of science fiction that shows extreme progress is informed by the time and place in history where the authors were writing this science fiction? For example, the rapid technological progress from 1945 to 1975, close quote. Okay, so TCAT, I think the irony about science fiction is this. In the year 1920, you could make a lot of money writing science fiction fast. So it was actually the technological limitations of the printing press. It's mind-blowing. I was doing some reading recently about a successful author. He was successful in 1920s, 30s, 40s. And even when you hear George R.R. Martin talk about his youth, when he was first writing stories, I believe it was 1960s, 1970s, maybe just early 1970s, he starts writing. There was money in writing short stories, just short stories that appeared in a magazine, you know? So I think what's ironic about the history of science fiction is that we're actually talking about an art form that was destroyed by technological progress, because today there is no money in writing at all. And in that sense, science fiction has disappeared. No, it still exists in television, what have you. But you go out and pick up a copy of Asimov magazine or whatever. You go look at the pulp and paper world. I mean, there's no money in mainstream journalism. There's no money in the printed word anymore. So yeah, there is a sense in which science fiction was inspired by technological progress. But I also think science fiction was just another way of packaging whimsy and making a living out of it. And so much of science fiction just relies on magic. John Carter, Hero of Mars. Instead of Mars, it could have been he was traveling to the ancient past, and many of those stories could have been, it really wouldn't have been much different if it were a fairy world as opposed to another planet. There are many ways in which science fiction is not distinguishable from other kinds of fantasy, fable, and whimsy, where, like the fact that this takes place on Mars as opposed to a fairy kingdom or something, or traveling back in time instead of forward in time, doesn't fundamentally change that much. I'm still catching up with your comments, guys. Thanks. Lots of substantive comments here. I can't reply to all of them. It's certainly nice to have more intelligent comments than you can reply to than less. So another interesting comment from Rasmus. Rasmus says, quote, that he used to live in a diehard religious country where even saying things like God doesn't exist would have put his life in danger. That's why he moved to Estonia, one of the most secular countries in the world. Quote. So congratulations, Rasmus. But, the question is, what now? What next? Right? So look, I'm not going to say Estonia is paradise. I've never lived there. I had one Estonian friend for like 1 year of my life. It wasn't a long friendship. He could have stayed in touch with me. Maybe he watched the YouTube channel today, but he didn't. So I just probably, if I went to Estonia, I would probably still feel it's too religious, it's too Christian for my take, probably. But with that having been said, if you treat Estonia as a success story, how do you take Estonia and push the border forward, so to speak? I don't mean actually conquering other countries, but how do you actually expand the realm of secular space on planet Earth? Now, hypothetically, maybe downtown Los Angeles is quite a secular or nihilistic place. I think if you go there, you're going to be shocked at how many people are really religious. But even if you were to say that, okay, so there's a little bubble of secular atheist people here, maybe in downtown New York City. How do you push that? How do you extend that to include Texas and Georgia? And I'm just being honest with you, Rasmus. I'm not saying this to hate on you. I don't know anyone who's asked themselves that question anywhere in the world. No institution, no foundation, no broadcaster, no YouTube channel. Like, really, there are these dedicated YouTube channels that get a lot of money that are atheist call-in shows. They're not planning for that. They're not trying to make that happen. They're not trying to take the little nugget of secularism you've got in Los Angeles and expand it to Texas, or Estonia and expand it elsewhere, or the Czech Republic, right? Like, no one is trying to push forward in this way, to my knowledge, anywhere in the world. So again, this is also the sense in which the debate about agnosticism is bullshit. You're not agnostic. No, this is a kind of insincere form of agnosticism. Do you think the world would be a better place if you could expand that realm of sophisticated, secular, scientific atheism? Do you think the world would be a better place? Or do you think the world would be a better place if the Islamic State expanded, if the Taliban expanded, right? You're not agnostic. No, you really believe the world is going to be a worse place if the Taliban keep expanding, or for that matter, if the Catholic Church were in a similar, if the Vatican City were expanding. It's not going to happen, but if there were an equivalent Christian fundamentalist realm that was expanding, what you think will be good for the world is expanding the scope and depth of atheism. You're not agnostic about that. So now what? So now what are you going to do to make it happen? What are any of us going to do to make it happen? And I'm sorry, but for so many of us, the true answer is nothing. We have a funny little joke here from someone named Christoph. So Christoph, I've got to tell you, if you're a real atheist, you got to change your first name. Christoph says, Catholic gyms are the best. Carry the cross for 20 miles. I don't think it was 20 miles that Jesus carried the cross, though. Alexa, for how many miles did Jesus carry the cross? It wasn't that far. You can walk it in Israel.
Here's something I found on the web. According to blurted.com, it would appear that Jesus carried his cross for a distance of 1/2 mile.
Thank you. So Alexa says 1/2 mile. But yeah, I would be willing to go up to 1 mile or something, but what's not that far. So anyway. But yeah, sure, great workout, carrying a wooden cross. Maybe we can do that at the Nihilist gym. We can mock other religions with our forms of exercise. Come up with one for Islam, some physical feat of strength that Muhammad did or something. I don't know of any, but yeah, sure. I don't know. You could make something up for Moses too, parting the Red Sea or something. It's a gym exercise. Yeah, right. Something like that. Okay, so totally reasonable comment from a longtime follower of the channel is called "Do you want to give me a kiss?" I'll call you Kiss, or I don't know if you're male or female. I don't know if you say Mr. Kiss or Mrs. Kiss. But "Do you want to give me a kiss?" says, quote, Eisel, all these authors didn't do it for you. They didn't do the work for you. But most of them have at least one constructive thought to add to the discussion. Okay, so Kiss, not to my fucking knowledge. I do not know one thought Jacqueline Glenn has to add to this discussion. I do not know one thought Matt Dillahunty has to add to this discussion. Okay? If you don't think Matt Dillahunty is an idiot, all of you, Ashel, do you think you're smarter than Matt Dillahunty? I think you are. I don't think any of you really believe you're stupider than Matt Dillahunty. Okay? So look, I would love to live in a parallel universe where what you're saying is true, but it's not true. And again, none of those people have ever sent me one email, not even when I've written them first, not positively. I've gotten emails from some of them saying, no, we're not interested. We don't care. Fuck off. And I've gotten hate mail about Christmas and about the Notre Dame Cathedral, the other specific issues I've taken in atheist. But so no, I'm just telling you, I don't believe you. I don't believe any of those people have even one constructive thought to add to the discussion. And I can't say like today, I can't say like within this 24-hour period, if they had something constructive to add, that they would be here today. But over the last 8 years, sure I can. But I'm being real with you. I don't think there's even one. What do you think Richard Dawkins knows that you don't know? Let's keep it all the way. What do you think Richard Dawkins knows that you don't know? What do you think Sam Harris knows that you don't know? Jack shit, man. It's not, what they know is not worth knowing. And it has nothing to contribute to the discussion. Nothing. So there were some further responses. This is now half an hour ago or an hour ago. But Matt Angione says that he could start his own YouTube channel, or he could start his own platform of some kind. But he says, he says, quote, "You're right. I could start a YouTube channel, but would anyone listen?" This is my 100% honest response to that. Okay. If they don't, if it fails, wouldn't that motivate you to do something more and something next? Like, like taking a first step doesn't preclude taking a next step. I think it's going to inform and motivate you taking the next step, right? Like, if the first step you take is wildly successful, then maybe you don't take any next steps. But like most of this kind of development in one's own life on a small scale, if you're talking about one person or like a salon, a group of 10 people who work together, 5 people who work together, right? Like you take one step, it fails. You take another step, it fails. You take another step, it fails. Now, obviously, I don't just mean here within social media. I mean any kind of political activism, any kind of advocacy, religious, secular, others. But like a lot of people don't know this. Cenk Uygur, who is the impresario behind the Young Turks YouTube channel, he had a series of projects before that failed, right? Including a public access TV show. He had a show broadcast on TV. He took a step and he failed. So, okay, that doesn't work. Take a next step. Failed. He did a radio show on digital radio. I'm not sure exactly what the service, Sirius FM or something. Okay, so it failed, right? And like his first attempt at doing a YouTube show failed, right? But he adapted and he innovated and did something else. Now, again, in this case, I'm not limiting it to YouTube or social media, but whatever you do, like what I don't get is the people who fail and then they just continue believing in the method, like these fucking street protesters for Extinction Rebellion. So you fail and fail and fail, and you keep doing the same shit. You're not able to look at the situation analytically and be like, okay, well, we tried this. Now we got to do something different. Now we got to do something like, okay, so we tried standing in the street and chanting, and that didn't work. But there are people, they do it for 20 years, do it for 40 years, do their whole lives, the same method again and again. And they never take a step back and analyze, okay, what's the effort we're making? What are we putting into this? And what are the outcomes? Now, what have we got to do differently? How have we got to change to get the outcomes? But look, Matt, so you asked a fine question. So I challenged Matt before saying, hey, why don't you do it instead of telling this other YouTuber to do it? You know what I mean? Okay, Matt, so you're asking, in effect, what difference would it make? I'm just slightly rewording. Okay, Matt, it would make a difference to me. Maybe I'm not the only person, but maybe I am. Okay? It would make a difference to me. Right? I think that's all the fucking answer you need. And I've reached out to and done interviews with and done collabs with and supported people I have this much in common with, people who aren't vegan and people, I've been reaching out positively for years. Who the fuck has been reaching out to support me, man? Like, that's why I'm asking you in this really confrontational way. But like, think about it. So like, if this matters to you, and if you want to make a difference in the next 5 years or 10 years or something, right? Now, again, maybe I'm not the only one, but maybe I am. Maybe you'd look back on that and be like, well, that really meant something to Eisel, that there was one other person who stepped up and said, yeah, this really matters. Wow, sorry, I guess I didn't realize how many comments are coming in here. Okay, guys, look, veganism exists. It is a movement, even if it's a really crappy, terrible failure of a movement, even if it's a waste of your time, even if it's a waste of your money. I've been coming to the internet for years and asking about veganism. Look, are you a leader or are you a joiner? Are you going to be a follower? Are you going to join somebody else's movement? Or are you going to lead your own thing? Are you going to innovate your own solution to these problems? Are you going to take on some kind of new direction? In talking about atheism in this video, I'm really saying to you, there is no movement. There is nothing for you to join. There's nothing Sam Harris is doing that you can sign up for. There is no atheist society of America worth even fucking talking about, worth even dignifying with a critique in this video. There's no way to be a follower. There's no way to be a joiner. Either you are going to lead, either you are going to make something happen, or else nothing is going to happen at all. I say again, there was no positive opportunity in the year 1789, in the year 1791. Okay. The positive opportunity we had in the last 20 years was squandered due to lack of talent, lack of will. The opportunity was there. We had a much better opportunity between the year 2000 and the year 2020 than anyone had in France in 1789, and none of us had to die. None of us had to risk starvation, death by disease, or fighting just for our own lives. It was really, really tough conditions. Sorry, if you guys haven't, it's tough. It's just physically tough to endure. And, there were people out to kill you in your sleep and shoot you straight to your face in the light of day. It was rough. And people tend to only remember the violence of the revolutionaries against the Christians. Well, guess what? There were groups like the Brotherhood of Jesu and so on. There were Christian Brotherhood groups that were out killing the atheists too. There were royalist groups and traditionalist groups. There were pro-aristocrat groups, and but a lot of them were pro-church groups. They were fighting for the church. They were fighting for their immortal souls who were out there killing people on the other side. So there was violence on all sides. It was really tough. Nobody, if you look back at the last 20 years, nobody was facing those kinds of conditions. Nobody was facing those kinds of obstacles, right? But before 1789, in the century before, we had Voltaire. In the century before, we had Holbach and Helvetius, right? We had these books. It's hard to say. Did they have a greater or lesser impact than a shithead like Sam Harris in our time? Really, how many people actually read Helvetius or Voltaire even? How many people actually read these books compared to any of the atheist hit authors? Or Daniel Dashett, or whatever the fuck is it? And these people, the audience reached by the Four Horsemen and so on and so forth. What really was the social impact of, as I said before, pamphlets that were printed and shared at coffee shops in Paris compared to YouTube in our day, compared to the internet in our day, compared to broadcast media, television, books today, right? Probably very limited. Okay. What they had, it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right place. There wasn't anything that made it easy for anyone, right? But they had talent, all right? There were people like Voltaire who wrote things that inspired others into thinking that a better world was possible, a better life was possible, and that ultimately it was worth struggling for. I don't have a big audience, okay? I don't. Even those of you who say you're agnostic, or even those of you, I have some people in my audience who might say you're some kind of spiritualist, like you're not an absolute atheist, you have some kind of hippie spiritualist. Every single one of you believes that a better world is possible. Every single one of you at least looks at the mediocrity of America today, the mediocrity of Switzerland today, the mediocrity of Denmark today, the mediocrity of Paris today, wherever you're living, the mediocrity of Australia today. Boy, does Australia ever get off easy in these discussions. Every single one of you looks at the mediocrity of the education system in your country and the role of religion within it, and you think, we can do better. Something better is possible. A better society is possible. The problem is, what are you willing to do to get it? Nobody's going to do it for you. Sam Harris is not coming to save you. Jesus is not coming to save you. There is no atheist Christ coming to save you. And there's no atheist pope and there's no atheist church either. As I said earlier, we don't even have an atheist PETA. We don't have the atheist equivalent of the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. There's no organization you can donate to. All right? Like when you look ahead to the next 20 years and you see what's happening, our period of moral relativism and whatever the hell we're going to call post-neoliberal globalization, refugee welcoming, multiculturalism, this ridiculous pretense that everyone is equal, and the way in which, organized religions take advantage of that. You see what's happening in our society. And if you listen to this whole video, I don't single out the Muslims. Like, put it this way. I do not think there was anything wrong with Islam that wasn't already wrong with Christianity and Judaism before Islam. You know what I mean? But however, conversely, the same things that are wrong in Christianity and Judaism are wrong in Islam, right? So look, guys, there is no way I can do a fundraiser for an already existing cause. There's no way I can point a finger at an organization and say, sign up now. There's no way I can point to any intellectual rival I have, any author of any book, any leader of any, it's not just Jacqueline Glenn, okay? There's nobody where I can say, hey, go support what this guy's doing. Put it this way, there is no Bernie Sanders for atheism. Like, as flawed a figure as Bernie Sanders is, if you don't know, I have all kinds of criticism of Bernie Sanders. A lot of things wrong with Bernie Sanders. But if what you want is a $15 an hour minimum wage and better healthcare for poor people and cheaper tuition at university, I can point to Bernie Sanders and say, that's the guy, that's the organization you're going to give it. Those are the things you want. That's the guy who's going to do it for you. Okay. What I'm saying to you about atheism and the future of religion is nobody is going to do it for you. And nobody is going to do it for me either. Nobody is going to help me. I'm not expecting one email to come after this video. I'm not expecting one offer of a collaboration from a publisher. Think about it. In your own town, Google it right now. How many fucking hippie publishers are publishing poetry at a loss? Books of poetry, books of self-indulgent memoir bullshit. All kinds of shit is getting published. Ink is getting poured on the page for all kinds of shit that's going to reach an audience of 50 people, or mostly friends and family of the author. Whenever I look up these small independent presses, they're all publishing horse shit. Okay? I've been doing this for 8 years. I've reached almost 6 million views now. I forget, it's 5.7 million or something like that now. Okay? I have no publisher for any of my projects, not children's storybooks, not books about atheism, not books about Socrates, not books about political philosophy. There is no publisher. I'm not going to get one email from a publisher. I'm not going to get one email from a podcast. I'm not going to get one offer from another YouTube channel for a collaboration. Nothing. So even at that level, nobody's going to help me, let alone creating an organization like the YMCA, an atheist nihilist organization, really as bricks and mortar or something. Not one, okay? I begin this broadcast alone and I end this broadcast alone. Nobody is going to make it easy on you, and nobody is going to make it easy on me. Look ahead to the next 20 years of life on planet Earth. Okay? You tell me, what can you do and what can we do to make that change? Because it's the most fucking depressing thing on earth to admit to yourself that in terms of the progress of atheism and the progress of religion, in 2021, the world is a worse place, not a better one, than it was in 2001. And you tell me where we're going to be in 2041, because I have no reason to think that things are going to get better rather than worse.